And there we go. Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. Welcome back to the Ahmadiyya Fact Check Blog. I'm the host, Bashir Ahmed Shah. Today I have two very special guests, academics, researchers, Bilal Muhammad and Dr. John Morrow. And we're talking about the book that they just wrote together, co-wrote. Here's the photo. You can also see the photo on the background, Bilal Muhammad. There's the book.
And on the foreground as well.
Go and get the book. You want to read about the biggest mystery in American Islam? This is it. This is the biggest, the most fascinating story. Waiting for a Netflix, the documentary. Not sure when that's going to happen, but very interesting. Very interesting. If you ever are into American history, Islam, the Nation of Islam, Islam in general, rap music, jazz, 1920s, and then in the 1950s, all of this is intertwined into a fascinating story of Islam in America, its development, its regression, progression, however you want to explain it. And I went through the book, and I came up with like 40 questions. Maybe I watched some interviews, and we're just going to run through them. So we're starting off with chapter 1. Put on my glasses. I dropped my glasses. Okay. So, okay, chapter 1, as I was reading through the book, the first thing I start to come across is, so the FBI reports are accurate. And I had a problem with this, I have to confess, because the COINTELPRO, they're the same people that killed him. They're the ones that killed him off, and they're the ones that had a hand in starting it. So I didn't want to believe, but sometimes you're forced to believe when facts emerge. So with that being said, who's got the first question, and tell us about the FBI reports, and are they accurate?
Well, the FBI has some of the best investigators in the world. Are the FBI reports accurate? Yes, by and large. What I criticize is the fact that they didn't follow up on all leads. They missed so many opportunities. For example, they failed to track down Fred Dodd's wife, Pearl Allen, from the Klamath Nation. They failed to track down his partner in crime and prison mate, Edward Donaldson. They also failed to interview Farad's earliest disciples and followers. So overall, yes, but what pains me is the fact that they failed to track down all of these people, and they didn't follow up on really important leads.
Okay, but there were a few iterations of the FBI report. There was a 1959, I think they even said he was a Nazi agent, and then they were like, no, here it is. I think 1963. So can you elaborate on that?
As for the new Chicago Crusader article from 1959, it was leaked from the FBI investigation on Farad that was closed in, I think, 58. Among the many tips the FBI had received was one that claimed that W.D. Farad was a Turkish-born Nazi agent who worked for Hitler in World War II. It was a bona fide lead at the time. So, I mean, the FBI knew that Wallace Farad had been Wally Dodd Ford, who had been Fred Dodd, who had been known as Fred the Turk. Subsequent research, however, has shown that Fred Dodd came from British India. The FBI had also received tips that Farad supported the Germans and the Japanese. Although it's not outside the realm of possibility, there's no corroborating evidence to support such claims.
Okay, but the FBI did eventually get it right.
Well, get it right, yes, that the person from Detroit, W.D. Farad, Wallace Farad, was indeed Wally Dodd Ford, who had previously been Fred Dodd in Oregon. All of that was correct. But they never, when they say they never positively identified him, that means they were never able to determine where this man came from. Right? They were looking for a birth certificate, a nationality, a passport, or something. They didn't have access to all of that immigration information. they didn't have access to those passenger lists. And so, it's not a failure on their part. It's just they didn't have access to that information. But fortunately, now, due to all of these digitized resources and so on, we've been able to identify that he came from British India, what is now Pakistan. And we could move forward from that.
Sounds good. So when I first read about the Ford Bottling Company, which is also in the FBI reports, I was like, a bottling company in Hawaii, which Hawaii was not even a state at this point. Hawaii didn't become a state until like 1960, actually. I'll find that in just a sec. But it wasn't a state. Even when it was bombed during World War II, Pearl Harbor, it wasn't a state. It was a territory. So and I started, once I realized that the FBI actually might be accurate, I went back and I found a Ford Island. There was like a Ford family that had an island. So being a Polynesian doesn't mean he's from New Zealand. You could be from Hawaii and be a Polynesian. So anything on that? What do you have on that?
Well, was Farad a Polynesian? Was he a Hawaiian? No. He was an East Indian, an Indo-Pakistani. His maternal language was Urdu, according to forensic linguistic analysis, which is 98.5% accurate. And if it's off like 1.5%, it doesn't mean he spoke Maori or Japanese or God knows what. It might mean he spoke Hindi or another closely related language. So as a linguist myself, that finding is definitive. He was a native Urdu speaker, not an Arab or anything else. I had been very open to the possibility that he was Syrian Lebanese or something else. But as a scholar, I follow the evidence wherever it leads. So Farad was constantly reinventing himself, where he was born, when, and to whom. Zared Ford was his father. It would need to be confirmed with birth records in India or Pakistan. And there was no Ford Bottling Company. He made it all up. So that's the frustrating thing about Farad. He's an illegal alien. And so he makes it up. Right? Now, some things pan out. Some things turn out to be true, but we have to pursue all of these leads in order to find the facts.
Sounds good. So when this photo here, what was the response from Elijah Muhammad? Because that's got the mugshot. However, that's not the photo from the newspaper. So did the FBI see the photo from 1932 from the newspaper? Did they have access to those archives?
Bilal, can you take this one?
Well, at least according to the FBI file, they did take the mugshots. There's one particular page of the FBI file that I recall where they took the 1933 mugshot, which is the one that you're looking at, and they showed it to Wally Muhammad, and he was able to confirm. He said, "Oh, that's my sweet savior, my all-powerful Allah." And just a note about this $100,000 to prove charge thing. I can come out right now on this show. We're live, right?
Yeah.
And I could say, hey, I will offer $100,000 to anyone that proves that Bilal Muhammad has a brother. Okay. Now, Bilal Muhammad, in fact, has two brothers. Okay. Now, you can come with the evidence, and I don't have to give you the $100,000 unless the $100,000 is in an escrow account, or if we have some kind of contractual agreement. I don't legally have to give you anything. I could make this claim. I could say, I will give $100,000. But the point here is that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad did not put this in an escrow account. And in fact, Montgomery, who wrote the article, would come in 1965 with Hazel Barton and report on this in 1965. Hazel Barton came to challenge Elijah Muhammad for that $100,000. And Elijah Muhammad never brought it up again. Elijah Muhammad would pass in 1975, and this was never brought up ever again. So this was a challenge. The challenge was met, but he did not address those who came to meet the challenge, and he had no legal obligation to give the $100,000. So just him offering this is not itself independently proof that this man was not Wallace Farad Muhammad. And plus, I mean, he even strawmans Hearst or Montgomery in that article by saying that, bring him to us. Let me question this person to show that he is a fraud and that he is a fake. But that's not what Montgomery was saying. He wasn't saying, oh, this is someone that is currently in the custody of the police. He was just saying that this is the mugshot of the person from the 1930s. And honestly, that is proven. That is shown if you just, again, this just resurfaced in the last 15 years. But the Detroit Free Press has the photo of W.D. Farad. Okay, this should be the most publicly, I guess, reliable source, because this is a publicly, and then right here you have the Des Moines Tribune. That's the second one, which I discovered in 2019 or 2020. Both of these photos are going to be our main resource when it comes to how Master Fard Muhammad looked like, because this is in a newspaper, this is public, this is in 1932 when Fard was still active. There's no record of Fard or Elijah ever challenging these photos, and in fact, the Detroit Free Press photo was confirmed by Supreme Minister John Muhammad in the 1980s and 1990s, and that's on video. That's on Alam Khan's channel. So this was the man. As much as like the portrait, the official portrait of Master Fard Muhammad has relevance and importance, the main reference has to be the Detroit Free Press and Des Moines Tribune photos, which Amazon Recognition determined with 99.5% certainty or accuracy. You can read it in this book. 99.5% accuracy that the Des Moines Tribune or rather that the Detroit Free Press photo of Master Fard Muhammad is the 1933 Wallie Ford photo mugshot, the same one that is in that $100,000 challenge. 99.5% certainty. So did Farad just have an evil twin who was in Detroit at the same time as him, and in Chicago at the same time as him, and in California at the same time as him, and this person happened to have Bobby G as his mother's name, and this person happened to be the same weight and height as Master Fard Muhammad? I mean, come on, right? We live in the real world. You can believe these things out of faith, and I can see how faith can, it helped a lot of people, these teachings. They got some people off of drugs, some people out of prison, some people out of prostitution. How to Eat to Live has a lot of sound advice about dieting. However, we are historians, and we do have to be honest. After all, Master Fard Muhammad is not a spook god. He's a real person. He's flesh and blood, and we have to be interested in who this person was. Born in 1877, maybe. Died in 1934. I'm not convinced. On the spaceship, also not convinced.
Sounds good. So okay, let's move along here. For some reason, I started with question 2. I have no idea why I started with question 2, but no worries. So let's go to question 1, and I'll put it on the screen. How has access to newspapers and tell-all books changed everything?
Well, digitized newspapers have revolutionized research. They were always there. However, one had to go to a library and go through rolls and rolls of microfiche. You literally had to read every single article of every single paper for years and years and years. It was tedious, time-consuming, exhausting. It moved at a snail's pace. Now we can search through 1 billion pages of historical newspapers with one click.
Totally a game changer. Totally, which reminds me of how far have you gotten on the final call? Because I saw a few of them from 1934, which gave us a lot of new information. How's that going?
Well, we're hoping, more documents will surface. There are many more documents out there, primary sources, documents dating from 1930 to 1934 and shortly thereafter. They're locked away in vaults. They haven't been made publicly available. Some of these documents have been published. The letters from Master Fard, also some of the early instructions that Elijah Muhammad gave to his ministers. Some of those documents dating back to 1934, which is gold. And so there's still a lot of work to be done. But of course, we need access to those documents. And it's not just the documents that were in the attic of Supreme Minister John Muhammad's home. These documents that belong to him and his wife, Burnsteen Sharif Muhammad. There are many other children and grandchildren of the pioneers of the Nation of Islam who surely have documents from the early 1930s. And before they're lost, please consider making them available, sharing them with historians so that we can document and preserve this rich history.
Yeah, we
Sounds
encourage the FBI and the Nation of Islam to make all these documents available because guess what? The Nation of Islam gets a lot of its reputation from saying that, hey, traditional religion in many respects has failed. Traditional religion in many respects has been a racket for many people. Well, we don't want the Nation of Islam to fall under the same problem. We want the Nation of Islam to be forthright, transparent, and open with any documents they may have. That might be in the form of letters, that might be information, that might be stories of pioneers. Yeah, please make this available if you are in this position. You can always reach out to myself or Dr. John Andrew-Morrow or other historians, Anton Batey, Kevin Morris, Dr. Michael Muhammad Knight, because our only interest is understanding and preserving this history.
Now, I've been in contact with some of those people, and one individual, I won't be too specific, said that she had all kinds of information and documents and so on, but she wanted money. And, you know, I don't pay to play. I'm a historian. We don't make money publishing academic books. I refuse. I think it's a shame. But if we look at the collection that belonged to John Muhammad, that was on the auction block, it was estimated to be valued. It was valued at $500,000. And so $500,000. I was just looking at a picture of all the documents and so on, because I went to the auction house just before this interview to see. That's what they were expecting, right? You know, we're starting the bid at 500,000. Can I get 525,000? Can I get 750,000? All right, so you can understand why this resulted in a family feud. Perhaps there were members of the family who wanted to make this publicly available, create a museum, for example, share these documents. Others clearly wanted to profit from them, and that's why they've been locked in a vault for, since at least 2017. And yeah, that's the reality, or before that. So yeah.
One hand washes the other.
Yes, it does. You know, it smells like a racket.
Yeah. So here's a off-topic question. How much do you think Elijah Muhammad was worth when he died, 1976, 75 or 76?
We know exactly how much he was worth. I believe I mentioned it in the book. I'm not sure. I could look it up. It would take me probably.
You did mention it, yeah.
Yeah, I did mention it because when he passed away, there was a battle over his inheritance. And we have all the documents from the attorneys and so on. It was he was worth a lot of money. I don't want to give a number. While Bilal Muhammad is answering another question, I might look it up in my book and share that with you in a few minutes.
I actually just looked it up. It is in our book. It's on page 306. And it says that, quote, the empire which Elijah Muhammad established was estimated to be worth $70 to $100 million. And the source for that is Jet Magazine, Elijah Muhammad Wills $200,000 Estate to Kids. And that was published April 17, 1975. And it's on ElijahMuhammadSpeaks.com. Okay.
And so you said 70 to 100 million?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, if you could just Google what, $100 million is worth now, right? Let's say $100 million from 1975. What is the current value of that? It'll just take you a second. Any of you who have.
Let's do that. Yeah, I'll do that. So 100 million in 1975 worth today. This is USD, of course. 602 million roughly.
So he was almost he was half a billionaire. Yeah.
He was a Billy. He was a Billy. He was close to it. Well, when you're a consumer or your followers and you have a grocery store and you're selling to your followers, you cornered the market, Yeah, so it's the same thing with the Easy estate, same thing with the Tupac estate.
Right.
All these estates with all this money, it's hard. Yeah, sorry. go
Now,
ahead.
there's something I would like to mention here is that all of that money belonged officially to the Nation of Islam as an organization, right? As a religious denomination. But towards the end of his life, Elijah Muhammad insisted on turning all of that into personal wealth under his name. This is very well documented, all of his interaction with his attorney and his accountant and so on. So like when it belongs to the church, it belongs to the church or the mosque or the temple. But he made sure that it was all transferred under his name and it was all his personal wealth. And then his children, they squabbled and they fought and they wanted this fortune divided up among them. This is just being factual.
Yeah, and let me say, I thought the Quran solved all of that. I don't know.
That's a good one.
It does deal with inheritance. You're right.
Yeah, it does.
So I don't really, I have 2 sons, and hopefully I might not have any more. And I'm like, this one's easy. You guys don't have to. This one's set in stone. So if I have a 3rd kid, I'm like, it could ruffle some feathers. So I'm cutting into, I was like, I've told kids you shouldn't rely on your parents for their wealth anyways. You should create your own, especially if you're young, you got time. Anyhow, so okay. Elijah Muhammad was worth a lot. It's still worth a lot. And things have changed. What his children do, what W.D. Muhammad did by watering it down. I think at this point it's a fact that he watered down a lot. Maybe even some of the business side of it. Who knows? But going back to the digitizing, this book here, and I have it on Kindle. Did they almost Anton Beatty? There's so many references to newspapers in this. I had to go back, double check, triple check. Like they really, and John, I was looking in the wrong newspapers. After I read this, I'm like, what was I looking for the last 3 years? Which I don't know, is newspapers.com, are they updating new? Because the Cleveland Call and Post from 1934, it wasn't there last year when I was snooping around.
Yeah, they're continually adding, but it's not the only repository of digitized newspapers. There's Chronicling America. There are like Jewish papers that are not on newspapers.com. You have to go to different websites, all kinds of Canadian papers. Sometimes it's on the website of that newspaper, but it's not publicly available through like, any other subscription. So again, it's I don't want to give a number, but still it's still a small percentage of all available publications and small newspapers and small runs and African American newspapers. So we're going to continue to learn more and more and more as more sources are made available. In Mexico, for example, there's really no way at the moment to search newspapers. It's all scattered. Sometimes you have to actually go to a certain place, to a university, and you have to search it on their database. A lot of these things are not publicly available. And so, right, yeah, I mean, so it's still boots on the ground, going to libraries, archives. Well, see, that's the other thing. There were all kinds of Arabic language newspapers in Detroit in the 1930s. They're not available, right, online. They haven't been digitized. And the late Dennis Walker, may God have mercy on him, who was, a great scholar of the Nation of Islam. He was from Australia. that was his last project. He was going to come to Windsor. He was going to stay with my parents, and he was going to cross the border into Detroit to go to, I think it was Wayne State University or something, where they have all of these archives of the Arabic language newspapers from Detroit. And he was going to see if there was any reference to the Allah Temple of Islam, the Nation of Islam, W.D. Farad, the Moors, right? Anything. And he wasn't able to do it. And I would encourage, if anyone's interested, graduate student, PhD students, anyone who's physically based in Detroit, who speaks Arabic, who reads Arabic, go through those documents and see what it reveals about the Nation of Islam. I went through the Jewish newspapers in Detroit, and I did find stuff about the Nation of Islam, but it was from later decades, and how the Jews were so happy that the Nation of Islam was telling their followers to eat kosher. It was doing wonders for the kashrut business in town, right? But yeah, so please dig, study, research, investigate, share, publish.
Right. And newspapers are so good because it's almost unbiased. It's biased a little bit, but it's like a fact in time. It's like writing on the pyramid,
Right.
And if the Safavid Empire had a newspaper, that would have changed everything, because we got the Safavids who just happened overnight. They flipped the state overnight, and there's really not a lot of details. There's a little bit, but if we had newspapers in Persian, and even someone would need to translate them and etc. But so the same thing in the Ahmadiyya research, like a lot of guys, I'll tell them, all you got to do is read your Urdu newspapers from the 1920s. Even in British India, like I had researched Christianity in India, Sir William Mir, and there's a lot of Urdu newspapers that no one's ever went into to try to find some of these facts. And because most people would rather watch a YouTube video. Who wants to read? You know what I mean? Like, reading is not a thing. Like,
here we are.
Yeah. Here we are. But like, so I've been wearing reading glasses for almost 10 years. I tell people it's the evidence that I've been reading too much. There's a famous wives' tale, and we're going to talk about baseball here too. But a Lenny Dykstra, not sure if you guys are familiar with Lenny Dykstra, crazy as hell. But he said he heard old wives' tale. If you're a baseball player, don't read any books. So he said he never read a contract. And he was like, the reason was, they were like, you need your eyesight to see that ball. So if you're reading a lot, you might end up with glasses. You might not be able to see it as accurate as you need to see it.
I guess I'm not going to be a ball player.
Yeah. Same thing with if you're like a fighter pilot, your eyesight, because you got to see a dot on your dirty window. If you're a fighter pilot, to see someone coming, because the radar will pick them up. But if you could see them,
but you don't need glasses to shoot them down.
No, because now the computers will just guide it for you. So I mean, you don't really miss anymore. Yeah.
And Bilal 1, airplane, jets 0.
Yeah, and that's how you can tell if the shooter is military trained, because the guys from the hood, if they shot at some places, 20 bullets that all missed. Nothing was shot straight. But if you're Lee Harvey Oswald, one shot, you got it.
That's what they call it.
So there is a difference in shooters. People who are trained and who are not trained. So okay. So we talked about Batey. What about the book by Wakeel Allah? This was an interesting one. What was this one based on? Was it mostly newspaper reports or a lot of Burnsteen?
Well, that one's on the history of the 5 percenters, but he has another book on the Nation of Islam pioneers, which is this one here.
Oh, right? I got the wrong one.
Yeah,
no, I got all you want.
Okay, there's that one and this one. Good. Those are the ones that we relied upon. Yeah.
Yeah, and then as I go to the back, there's like 600 references.
Yes. It's well referenced, but of course he's very careful to stay within the parameters of Nation of Islam dogma and doctrines. So he does mention that Master Farad was traveling all over the place, and that he went to California. but he doesn't mention who he was visiting there because it's an inconvenient truth. He was visiting Hazel Barton, and he was visiting his son, right? Wallace Max Ford. And Hazel Barton mentioned that he was previously known as Fred Dodd, which connects us all the way back to Oregon, and it reinforces this historical narrative. So he did a great work, but again, it's a religious work because of those reasons, and not truly a historical work because he's ignoring some critical questions.
Yeah, yeah.
But we thank him for his research. It has really helped to fill in the blanks, and it's provided us with all kinds of additional details.
Right, and any details of work, because we can run them through our reference verifier, which is just us, people double checking references, triple checking references,
and I love the accounts that he provides from the pioneers, because these people would have been forgotten. And I know Alam Khan went and he copied and pasted everything that was said or attributed to Master Farad, and he published that in his works. So these are like hadith from W.D. Farad, sayings, stories. All of that sheds incredible light into his ideology and its origins.
Right, and that's the Islamic tradition, is to, if someone said something, verify it. You don't just believe something. I think there's even like a hadith that says anyone who just repeats something that they heard, it's not a good thing. Always verify, is this true? Is it not true? Don't just believe bro because bro said, But as you know, people just do that. So
it's in the Quran, if a fasiq comes to you with بِخَبَرٍ, فَتَبَيَّنُوا. I don't have the verse memorized, but if he comes with a piece of news or information, then try to investigate it and
ask for proof. What is your evidence?
Right.
So people make all kinds of wild and outlandish claims, all right, at which they can't back up. But as scholars, historians, and academics, everything we state, we back it up. We have a reference. We have multiple references. So we're not just making stuff up, okay? So, of course, we're just talking here, but if you want all the references, read our books. All the references are there. Check the references.
Right, and when I read a book, I normally start at the back, and I go through the references.
I do the same thing as well. That's how scholars read books. We go and check the bibliography. We look at the endnotes. If you open a book and there's no bibliography, clearly it's not a scholarly book. You want to look at the references and the notes and so on. That's where we begin.
Yeah, and it's like the other thing is a lot of people take issue with what we say or what we conclude. Take issue with the references. I mean, there's so little of ourselves in these books. We're not really speculating that much. We're not. I mean, if we're speculating, well, I'll take the credit or the criticism for it. But the vast majority of what we're saying, 99% or more, it's in the book, it's in the reference, it's in the footnotes, it's in the endnotes. You should follow that up yourself, and you can then give your argument as to whether that is an authentic source or not. So if you have an issue with Bainon, take it up with Bainon. You have an issue with Hatem Sahib, you have an issue with Elijah Muhammad, you have an issue with John Muhammad, you have an issue with the FBI files. There's no perfect source. However, we're taking a combination of sources to try to uncover a specific reality which has been hidden all this time. And most of this is not coming from us. It's coming from our research.
Yes, and our language is always very cautious. It seems, it appears, the evidence would suggest. We rarely speak in absolute terms. There are certain things that are absolute, that are verified, that are indisputable, and there are so many references, to support them that we can say, yes, this is a fact. But for other things, right? Like, someone mentioned that, I just uploaded a random picture of some woman, and I made up this whole story about Laura Swanson. Obviously, this is a person who doesn't have a high school diploma or a GED, right? Clearly, because anyone with just a basic education would know that that's preposterous. The account of the sexual assault of Laura Swanson at the hand of Fred Dodd is well documented in newspapers. It went to court. We have all those court documents as well. So that is a fact that Fred Dodd was accused of sexually assaulting that woman. And we completed genealogical research. We identified who she was, when and where she was born. We look up birth certificates, marriage certificates, divorce certificates. All of that, we know where she's buried. We obtained photos from her family. So this is fact, all right, that this happened. Did he do it? Was he falsely accused of doing it? Okay, Allahu Alam. Still, there is no doubt about that. We're not just making up things.
Right. Okay, in the Anton Batey book, something that stuck out to me was the 1927 case, Ford versus Donaldson.
Yes. I had explored that in I think my first book, Finding W.D. Farad. Yes. So
no, so sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah.
The reason I might not have caught it in your first book is because I got the book form. I don't have the PDF.
Yes. I thought I sent you the PDF. It's so much easier to find things.
Right.
Yeah.
And I don't know where I put it. It was right here, but yeah, when I have something in book form, it's almost like it's less valuable to me.
No. Yes. So yeah, it's not as if Wally Ford just went to prison. When he was convicted and he said, I'm just going to do my time, he fought back. He appealed, right?
He's a smart guy.
He appealed. And I think he was saying that he had been set up or framed or whatever, something along those lines. I haven't read it in years. Do you remember, Bashir, what it was about, his lawsuit?
No,
this is a man who is suing people, all right? Shortly after arriving in the United States. This guy is literally fresh off the boat, and he is so confident in his ability and his abilities and his knowledge that he goes to court and he defends himself and he fights back and so on. So again, this is not an ignorant man. He's an educated, confident man. It says a lot. And also, I mean, I wasn't expecting this question. He did not serve his full sentence. He got out early. But Donaldson, he stayed in prison, which makes us wonder, did he cut some type of deal? Right? Was he recruited out of prison? We don't know. That is just speculation. But why was he released? Okay, he was a good prisoner. We have that. There's documents that he wasn't a problematic prisoner. So maybe it was because he was well behaved. Or did he get a job? We don't know. But it's worth investigating. I did look into it. The FBI, intelligence agencies in the U.S. were not recruiting out of prisons in the 1920s. You were excluded from service if you had a criminal record. So,
yeah, he's not Donnie Brasco. He's not.
Yeah.
Because Donnie
this
Brasco
would have been before the kind of MK Ultra programs. I mean, maybe a deal was made. I don't know.
We don't know, but it's worth looking into.
Yeah,
because immediately he leaves San Quentin prison, he goes straight to Chicago, where he appears under the name of William Ford, and quite possibly that this is just 2 months before the murder of Noble Drew Ali. There have been persistent rumors that he was involved with the Moorish Science Temple of America. And then when all of that, just blew up, boom, he appears in Detroit. And who are his followers? Many of them were from the Moorish Science Temple of America. So some people have suggested that it was an offshoot, a breakaway. Was he involved in trying to take it over? Maybe. But the problem is there is no proof, there is no evidence. That is speculation. So we would need proof of that. We don't have that at the moment. We also know that many of his followers were Jehovah's Witnesses. Okay, so he was recruiting from many different communities. Could have been the Theosophists, the I Am movement. Yeah. So again, there are so many avenues of research available to us.
Yep. So and we're gonna get to a lot of this stuff. We said a lot of things there that have a lot of overlap. Why was he seeking attention? In Oregon, he's putting himself in the newspaper. He's doing business marketing with his lunch, and then he's, you know, selling whatever he needs on the side. And sometimes he's seeking attention, but when he's in Detroit for the first 2 years, he was never in any newspaper. He's hiding out.
Right. So why was Fred Dodd seeking attention in Oregon? Well, he was a businessman. He was savvy. He knew all about advertising and marketing. One of the first public phones was hooked up next to his tamale stand, and he advertised that in the newspaper. People, if you want to make a phone call, come to my stand, buy a tamale while you're at it. He used to sell newspapers. His food stand was a place to read the paper and debate about politics. So he was already interested in politics and what was going on in the world. He was a magnetic man who attracted attention. He socialized with the elites. Now again, this is, you know, imagine a hot dog vendor, right? A shawarma vendor, right? He was socializing with the elites, editors, publishers, mayors, sheriffs, attorneys, business leaders, many of whom were documented Freemasons and Shriners. That tells us a lot. After Fred Dodd moved to California, where he adopted the name Wallie Ford, he continued the same line of business. He operated a cafe and a restaurant. He was known in Spanish newspapers as a street corner politician. He was also a hustler. He had no qualms about profiting from the prohibition of alcohol. Wally's Cafe was basically a speakeasy, at least in the back room or in the basement, where booze was produced and sold. It was also an opium den. Hazel Barton, who was a waitress there and with whom he lived in sin and who mothered his son, Wallace Dodd Ford Jr., was also closely associated with Chinese opium traffickers. Why would a drug dealer seek attention? They hide in plain sight. Growing up, you knew who the drug dealer was. He was the one with the "just say no to drugs" button, right? We always knew who the drug dealer was. They're salespeople. They're materialistic. They just care about the bling. Most drug dealers have antisocial personality disorders. They're sociopaths. They're narcissists. They have delusions of grandeur. They're impulsive. They lack empathy. They all suffer from serious personality disorders, including God complexes.
Wow. And it sounds like you're talking about Jay-Z.
Right. But listen, growing up in the hip hop scene and everything, right? You know, I was hanging out with a lot of 5%ers, the nation of gods and earth. And it's, yo, what's up, God? Right? Which turned into, yo, what's up, G? And then it was like, you know, it turned into, yo, what's up, gangster? But it's, you know, we're gods. And I said, if you're God, why are you slanging crack, man? What's up with that? You got a God complex. You're a drug dealer. You're a criminal. You're a thug. Okay. You're my homie, but come on, man. Right? Maybe, you know, God is in all of us, the particle or the spirit of God, right? We're all created by God. So in that sense, we're all God collectively from a point of view of tasawwuf, irfan, and mysticism. But we're not gods individually, right? Like, I'm God. No, that's not what the Sufis meant. It meant that, you know, God is everywhere and in everyone. And if we purify our souls, we could become at one with God. So everything we say, it's as if God says it. Every step we make, it's as if God took it. But this is the highest form of spirituality. It's not this thug on the street corner.
I should also mention that there was something called the New Thought movement at the end of the 19th century, early 20th century, a movement that would also go on to inspire people like Father Divine. And this is where a lot of the law of attraction, manifesting, and affirmations, all that comes from the New Thought movement. And the idea, the premise was that God was in everybody, and that if you believe through positive thinking and affirmations and manifestations, that you'd be able to basically come out with miracles. And so Father Divine, saw himself as God through New Thought. It's very possible and likely that Master Fard Muhammad was preaching a New Thought type of spirituality among Black people and with himself. I mean, when he was arrested, the psychologist did say that he was suffering delusions, that he was a divinity. So he very much, he said that he was a supreme being, for example. And so that could very well just be fitting into New Thought.
And they put him in a straitjacket and in a padded room along with Ugan Ali. I want to know what happened to that dude, right? Okay, because he disappears right after that. He didn't
Dr. Morrow.
Asylum.
It turns out, Dr. Morrow, and I think this will be mentioned in this interview, but
Yes.
Just jump ahead. So was it page 60 or 70? Or what page was it? No, here it is. Page 48 of the Reformer.
Yes.
You have Burnsteen Sharif writing to Master Fard Muhammad saying, we send their love and their assalamu alaikum, and he includes someone named Ugan. Now, as far as we know, Ugan was already gone, ironically, at this point. But
literally and metaphorically.
he gone by this point. But then it's like, but it looks like he was still in the movement until July 1933. And again, I don't want to jump too ahead, but the reason why we are writing a sequel book, and in the sequel book, I do prove that at least that particular letter is something that we can consider authentic, because Burnsteen does mention an article that was published in the Afro-American. And guess what? I go back to the Afro-American and I found Elijah Kareem's article, which was published when? July 1st, 1933, which is when this letter was dated. So as far as we know, that is authentic.
Which goes back to the question. So in those letters, Burnsteen was saying Farad wanted Elijah Muhammad to get published in the newspapers. So he's telling him to go and attract attention.
Yeah.
And however, for 2 years, Farad didn't want to know anything. He didn't want anyone to know, nothing in the newspaper. He's not promoting the school. He's not trying to get more students, nothing. All of a sudden, his photo appears and he panics.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll tell you what. So the first person to publish from the Nation of Islam in the newspaper was Master Fard Muhammad. He published in December 1932 in the Afro-American, and this was to say that, hey, Islam is not voodoo, and this Robert Harris person is not one of our members. So he just denies the allegations. He says Islam is, it's an old religion, and it has this many members in the world. And so he's the first to really publish in the paper. But then immediately after that, Elijah Muhammad, under the name Elijah Kareem, published several articles in 1933 in the Afro-American. And in the coming book after this one, I've already written the chapter on the 1933 look into Elijah Muhammad's articles, which seem to mostly line up with the Supreme Wisdom. It seems like, and in a sense, Elijah Muhammad, you can give him credit that he was sincere in preserving the Supreme Wisdom lessons that he was learning from Master Fard Muhammad. But that was all published while Farad was still active. But there's one claim, which is very interesting, in 1933, in which Elijah Muhammad says, and I have it in one of my videos on my YouTube channel, Bilal's Boulder. Elijah Muhammad says in black and white ink, white people cannot enter Mecca. We know that that is not the case. This would have been when Farad was still active. We can only assume that Elijah Muhammad got this teaching from Master Fard Muhammad. But yes, Elijah Kareem writes in 1933 that white people cannot enter Mecca. So for those who say that, Elijah Muhammad's right about everything, well, first of all, Master Fard Muhammad said that Elijah Muhammad was, quote, very near correct. So even according to Master Fard Muhammad, Elijah Muhammad wasn't right about everything. But secondly, that is a verifiable falsifiable fact that white people can indeed go to Mecca. Lastly, I'll say, for those who do believe that Elijah Muhammad was made the messenger of Allah, where does Master Fard Muhammad say that Elijah is the messenger of God? And don't tell me that Elijah Muhammad said it, because that's a circular argument. Give me a source, give me a reference, give me evidence that Master Fard Muhammad made Elijah Muhammad his messenger. Because as far as we know, from 1934, in the final call, he wasn't being called the messenger of God. The head of the movement, as far as we know, was Kalat, and Kalat was the, quote, head investigator. Elijah Muhammad was a minister. In the letters that Fard writes to Elijah Muhammad, he says that he is the minister of Islam. In the 1933 Afro-American articles that Elijah was publishing, he was just publishing his name as Elijah Kareem, minister of Islam. He would later call himself Prophet Elijah Muhammad. That is in some letters. That is in Supreme Minister John Muhammad's statements as well. He was calling himself Prophet Elijah Muhammad. At some point, he would refer to himself as Messenger Elijah Muhammad, Messenger of Allah, the final Messenger of Allah. And then later, further, he would say that he was the fulfiller of biblical prophecy, the Jesus of your Bible, the Muhammad of your Holy Quran. So Elijah was definitely, upgrading his claim and innovating in his claim about himself. But I don't personally see any evidence. I see evidence that Elijah Muhammad took initiative, that he was a de facto leader in 1933 in the temple in Detroit and the University of Islam. I have no problem saying that, yeah, Elijah Muhammad took initiative and showed leadership initiative and, had the approval of Master Fard Muhammad. But I don't see evidence that he, quote unquote, was the messenger of Elijah Muhammad in a final and exclusive way.
Right, and let me add to that. In April 1934, when 13 teachers were arrested, Elijah Muhammad wasn't even at the temple, and John Muhammad was listed as the leader.
He was the principal of the school. Yes, that is correct.
But eventually, the only person who was punished was Elijah Muhammad. He got 6 months probation. So maybe at that point. But going backwards here, why is it that Fred Dodd, aka Wallie Ford, he knows how to attract attention, but he's in Detroit 2 years flying under the radar, no newspaper, nothing at all, and then his photo appears, and it seems like the con is up. It's over. The jig is up. It is in the Malcolm X movie.
Right.
The jig is up.
So, So Elijah Muhammad's family converted in 1931, according to the Hatem Sahib thesis, 1951. I agree. You'd be hard-pressed to find newspaper references to the Nation of Islam pre-1932 from what's extant, what's been digitized. But also, that's 32 is when the voodoo murder happens. And I assume that most of Farad's activities were in 31 and 32. Because before the Hastings Street Temple, there was actually a temple on St. Antoine Street. St. Antoine Street is also in Black Bottom, Detroit. It's very close by. But I have some literature from that period. And before that, Master Fard Muhammad, it is said, was teaching in basements and such, according to Elijah Muhammad. And I personally have no reason to doubt that. You need to account for all the time when Fard was doing picnics at Belle Isle and dances and going to Wally Muhammad's house and teaching this elaborate theology and going door to door, bringing thousands of people. So I think it's safe to say that this was happening at least as early as 1931. Fard allegedly arrived in Detroit July 4th, 1930. And you're right, we can't prove or disprove that. That might be lore. It might be symbolic. The 4th of July, of course, significant for obvious reasons. But it might be true. And we know that Fard was in Chicago earlier that year in April 1930 as William D. Fard. That's in the 1930 decennial census dated April 22nd, 1930. And we can also confirm from a box of self-threading needles that Fard sent to Hazel Barton from Chicago that was postmarked April 28th, 1930.
Got it. Okay. So okay, okay. Now let's because I got a question in here that was bothering me. Did Fanusie see the photo, or anyone who was with the Muhammad Abdullah theory? WD Muhammad never saw Farad, but he's got the video where he confronted his mom about Farad being white. And he said he couldn't accept it. Turner in the 90s, did they see this photo? Because in my opinion, and you've said it also, this is the biggest piece of information on who he is. This almost solves the case entirely if you need corroborating evidence. But so, okay, did Turner see the photo? Did Fanusie see the photo? Is the photo that important?
Can I just say about Warith ad-Din, just one connection? So Warith ad-Din says in one interview with, I'm forgetting his name, but it's a Pakistani-American doctor who did this interview. He's the same one that does the interview with Farrakhan and Warith ad-Din side by side. There was another interview where he's just with Warith ad-Din, and it's on Lance Shabazz's channel. And Warith ad-Din says, quote, I had one, meaning I had a photograph of Master Fard Muhammad, and his hair was not parted. His hair was wavy to the back. So I do think Warith ad-Din had photos of Farad, maybe not the Detroit Free Press photo, maybe not the Des Moines Tribune photo, but other photos that he may have destroyed or were hidden. He says in that interview, he says, these photos were not freely distributed. In fact, they were kept from the community. So for whatever reason, there was a policy in the Nation of Islam, maybe as early as 1934, to not distribute photos of Master Fard Muhammad. Definitely after the 1960s, because you get that Hearst article. But I think maybe as early as 1934, because, between 1934 and 1960s, the only extant photo of Farad was that official portrait. And Warith ad-Din says that portrait was a made-up cosmetic photo of Farad. And it was, common in those days for photos to be airbrushed. There seems to be evidence of airbrushing. It was common for people to wear hair or wear makeup. Obviously his hair is slicked to the side there. So yeah, there you had the final call, photo. So they were already using this Theus studio on Hastings Street photo of Farad from 1934 or in 1934. And that's the only photo that would exist until the 60s. And then you get the Wallie Ford photos and the Nation denies them. And then, around 2010, you get the Detroit Free Press photo. And then 2020, you get the Des Moines photo. And you know what? Alam Khan, there was a photo that was sent to Alam Khan. Have you seen this other photo? No. So there is a photo of Farad kind of looking down. Now, there was some speculation that was AI generated. And it could be, but there actually is a mole above his left eyebrow, which is in that photo, and it is in all of the Farad photos, the mugshots, Detroit Free Press, Des Moines Tribune. And I think a lot of the time AI is not that accurate where it'll recreate a very slight mole above an eyebrow in that exact spot. So I'm inclined to believe that is real. Allah knows best. If I find it throughout this interview, I'll send it to you.
Sounds good. So one last question on the attracting attention. Why the school? Because the school brought him down. Well, first it was the murder that brought him down. You're running an illegal school with 100 kids. How long is this going to last? I start to think, if you're really doing this, but you're setting yourself up to get caught. Because why are you running the school? And okay, I get it. Even Masajid in America have a school connected to them. But they have a license. They have a permit. If this is a businessman knowingly operating a school without a permit. He knows it. He's knowingly taught, because this came up again, the Robert Harris murder, it came up again in 1934 with Sally Ali. She testified, she was taught the same thing. So, why this? Are you, almost get the impression, is he trying to get caught? And then the con was up. Once his photo shows up, the guy with the murder, he passes it off, he takes off. Maybe I don't know, but do you want to get caught? I didn't want to be a drug dealer. I'll tell you guys very candidly, because everyone I was going to be doing business with was an idiot. I was like, why am I going to sell drugs with you? You're stupid. You're going to get me caught. You're going to get us caught, and forget that I told my brother this. I don't want to do anything with you. I mean, you're the guy who's gonna be my downfall. So at a minimum, I'm avoiding you. And I was like, honestly, I think I need to just get a job and just like thug it out with a job. It's less stress. So
Yeah.
yeah. If you can enlighten us, why was he trying to get caught?
Okay. Why is he trying to get caught? Well, so yes, he did get arrested multiple times throughout his life. Laura Swanson being the first arrest on record, being arrested, I think, at some point with the Pearl Allen divorce, at some point being arrested again in 26 rather, and with the selling drugs to an undercover cop. And we found a new arrest actually in 31, Dr. Morrow, where he was arrested in Indiana.
Yes.
Yeah. So he was apparently arrested impersonating a police officer.
Yeah, in Hammond, Indiana. This is northern Indiana. It's very close to Chicago. It's not that far from Gary, Indiana. These were that was his territory, basically, right?
Yeah.
From Chicago all the way to Detroit.
And Dr. Morrow did try to find a mugshot, and unfortunately, they don't have that on record anymore because these do get destroyed after some time.
Right. I contacted the police department. I contacted the city there. I contacted the state archives, but unfortunately, nothing. But we do have that record. Arrested for impersonating a police officer. Yep. Why? For what purpose? What was he up to?
He was arrested in 32 in connection to the Voodoo murder, November 1932. He was arrested in May 1933 in Detroit. And that's where that mugshot is from. And then 1933 in September, he was arrested again for preaching in a rented hall in Chicago for supposedly inciting hate. The charge was thrown out, of course. Yeah, so he was arrested again and again and again.
Yeah, and so when I subjected those photographs and those mugshots and so on through, an emotional recognition software, right? It looks for outward signs of internal psychology. Like there was this one photo that my impression was, wow, look at this guy. It looks like he's about to kill you. But not according to the analysis. He was cool, calm, and collected. At times he was defiant. And so we discussed this, Bilal and I. And like Bilal said, it's probably due to the fact that he had so many run-ins with the law. He had been arrested so many times. He knew the law. He knew he wouldn't be held. He knew they'd have to release him. So he was a seasoned criminal, right? He was used to being arrested. He knew the procedures. Sometimes he'd have a smirk on his face, right? They mentioned the enigmatic smile of an Oriental fakir. Yeah,
that's some of the language I used to hear in the 90s. They'd say he was a career criminal. Or something like that. We say, no, not at all. I don't want to be.
Well, he may have been a revolutionary. He may have been politically motivated. Everyone, some people have a bad past. They change, they adapt, whatever it is. But I just want to say, with regards to the school, why did the school keep running? So my impression is that Elijah Muhammad was taking initiative and taking charge after the Voodoo murder. So I wrote a chapter about this in the upcoming sequel book. Spoiler alert. But the 1932 Voodoo murder was obviously a turning point for the nation and for Master Fard Muhammad personally. And a lot of the old followers had left at that point. But Elijah took charge. He led a protest calling for Farad to be freed. He published articles in the Afro-American that went on. They went on the offensive, basically. He kept the school running. He kept the temple running. And while others, they were going back to the Moorish Science Temple. They were going to other movements. But Elijah Muhammad became Elijah Muhammad, from Elijah Kareem. And he became just the most visible person in the movement. And it was also his main source of income. So that's what John Muhammad said, that any donations that were given to the temple, they would pay off the temple expenses, and then anything extra would go to Elijah Muhammad. So, I mean, Farad was looking like he was moving on in 33, but Elijah's family was ready to take over in Detroit by the time Farad disappeared.
Yeah, they were sinking in as the new taking it over, and there wasn't much to take over. But the school thing kept happening. In fact, I thought Burnsteen said that her kids were something happened in the 50s, which the school, another iteration of the school, it gets shut down, but then they started a legal school.
Yeah, so I mean, like from what I recall reading, and I don't quite remember from where, but they had started the school because these kids were being bullied by others, and they wanted to find a way to teach Islam to these children. And I think that was the motivation behind. I think I read this in Carl Evans' The Messenger, but that basically, they started the school in the temple. This was in the same building, because the children, I think, were being bullied or something. Because what was happening was that people involved in the Nation of Islam were being kicked off of welfare, and so their parents were getting in trouble with the law, and that was becoming a problem. So Hatem Sahib actually mentions this as well in his thesis. He says that the Nation of Islam, and this is in 51, he says that the Nation of Islam kind of curtained itself off from the rest of society because they had their school, they had their temple, they had their restaurant, they had their little store, and most of the time the members were spending their time in these like few places, and that they had little real connection to like outside society, and so much time was being spent in their community. So yeah, I mean, like they the intention could have been to kind of create this subculture and subcommunity that was curtained off from the rest of society.
Yeah. What's interesting about that is Burnsteen learned how to type in these same schools. That's a huge.
She would have learned to type before joining the Nation.
Like, I mean, that's a huge skill. Like, okay, so and if you go to West Oakland, 95% of the student body is black. In Detroit, Black Bottom area, they're not going to schools that are 50% white. Like just look at the demographic. Where I grew up, it's like evenly distributed, in the suburbs of the Bay Area. But if you go to West Oakland, it's not. If you go to East Oakland, it's not. It's 80-90%. Like, you're comfortable at that school. That's not the issue. And I don't recall them having a typing class at the new schools. Like, they're not even teaching typing, which is pretty easy to learn how to type. It's harder to be like an auto mechanic. Let me tell you. It's harder to pick cotton all day, something like that, or to be out in the fields. If you ever went out in the fields from sun up to sundown, that is not like typing. That is no. Whereas typing could drive you crazy because you're alone all day, and you gotta do all this work. So maybe a balance is the perfect way. But Burnsteen, the only educated woman that I came across, highly educated for that era, she was taught in those same schools. So I thought it was ironic that they're rebelling against a system that produced a stalwart, like someone who could have went to college.
Yeah, again, this was the Great Depression. This was the Great Migration. This was Jim Crow, the height of it. The lynchings were happening. You had somebody who was very highly educated in the early Nation named J.B. Morris, I think was his name. And J.B. Morris, if that's his name, I think it is.
Yeah, it is.
He was a lawyer. So this would have been someone who was highly educated, and he publishes articles in the newspapers in the 30s. And he looks like he was a follower of Elijah Muhammad at 34 or 35. And he went on to become an important person in the NAACP. You also had a preacher, Robert Bradby or James Bradby, I forget his name. But he was a white preacher from Detroit who requested a membership card from Master Farad Muhammad. He wanted a name, and he told Master Farad to come to the back of his church to give him this card. But Master Farad's like, nope. If you're going to come convert, you're going to convert like everybody else. You're going to have to come to the temple and reclaim your own there. This was a white preacher, and he also ended up joining the NAACP in the late 30s.
Yeah. So okay. and then the other thing about Burnsteen that threw me for a loop was because if you can type so much, that means you're a writer. I mean, and you read a lot because you gotta match, but some of her letters, maybe the academics weren't as much. You would think they would be better because the newspapers wrote more eloquently. Like the English, like my native English is not good at all. Like the one English I speak with my friends and etc. Is not a good academic version of English. But you would think she wrote something, in the 50s, in the 60s,
Right.
in the 70s, in the 80s,
Well, she wasn't the only. I guess she was. I mean, she was a big brain in the nation. She was a teenager, of course, but she wasn't the only one. So you had also William Thomas White, who Dr. Morrow could speak about in more detail. But he was a white engineer, British, who was from, was it Ferndale in Michigan near Detroit? Yeah, that's him. That's a sketch of him anyway. And so he was someone who was highly educated and zipped through his classes. He says he came in the front door, went out the back door in terms of education, and he aced all his courses and such. So
yeah, and his friends would call him like the walking encyclopedia.
Yeah. So we'll get to him. And I promise you, I know we've only got through 2 questions in an hour and a half. But there's a lot of overlap. And I'm not a preacher to where I'm gonna just go for long. So okay, moving on to question number 3 here. Okay, so I thought I saw a better reference for Farad coming to be the Mahdi of the Muslims and the Messiah of the Christians. And then in terms of Hatim, there's parts of that study that aren't even published anymore. Like, right? They said the spicy stuff he left out. Right? Oh, in the Hatim book, the iteration that everyone has read that came out in the 70s or the 90s or the
90s, yeah.
In the 90s, it's not the full thing, and all the spicy stuff is not in there.
I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think it was more like they fixed it to have more academic language because, I mean, this was this Arab dude from Iraq in the 50s who came across this little, 400-person, in his imagination, cult. And it's just like, what is this? They don't have salah. They don't have, and quite literally in the book, like you can see. No, I'm not joking. Like there are parts of that thesis that are a little bit less refined. There's some that are very academically, some of the pages. But then there are some pages where it's just like, this is not Islam. They call it a prayer. It is not a prayer. It's a so-called prayer. And I could just imagine this. Boomer Arab dude just discombobulating, or silent generation Arab dude, and he was hilarious. And then he falls in love with one of these girls. Did you see that, Dr. Morrow?
No, I didn't.
In Hatim Sahib's thing, there's this girl that keeps coming up, who's like half white, half black, and it's like he mentions her, and it's just like nothing. And then the second time, I just like, oh, she's very beautiful. And I'm just like, yeah, I know. We all know this guy. We know this guy.
Yeah.
And he went back to Iraq, and I'm sure he made a great career in other things not related to the Nation of Islam. But it's this great resource in terms of pre-Malcolm X Nation of Islam. And you know what? So much of it has been corroborated in recent years because people would automatically, something that comes out in the 90s and then it's attributed to the 50s, people are going to be skeptical because it's like, how do I know the university didn't just make this up? But then it's like John Muhammad lectures surface, and then that corroborates the Hatim Sahib stuff, and you're like, oh, looks like he didn't make it up.
Yeah. So for Brother John, were you able to find anything in the final call about the Mahdi of the Muslims and the Messiah for the Christians? Because it shows up in Hatim. For me, I didn't see it in Baining. What'd you find on that?
So we have Elijah Muhammad himself. We have his lesson from December 1934. In which he refers to Farad as our Savior, the Almighty Deliverer, who was Allah's only son. All right? Now, of course, if you just have something from 1950 saying that Farad was viewed as the Mahdi of the Muslims and the Messiah of the Christians, you're suspicious. But now, the instructions that Elijah Muhammad gave to his ministers have been published. I don't know if you have them. So it was, you know, there's the book about the two Burnsteen Sharif books, but there's another one that came out where they reproduced the original typed copies of these instructions from Elijah Muhammad. So these are primary sources. They do date from 1934, 1935, and so on. They were put up on the auction block. Now, whether it's Christie's or another auction block where you're selling stuff where the opening bid is $500,000, they have the greatest experts in the world. They authenticate and verify any of the items that they put up for sale. So these are original documents from Elijah Muhammad from 1934. He refers to Farad as our savior, the deliverer, the son of God. In August 1935, Elijah Muhammad said that Farad was the last of the Imams. Well, who is the last of the Imams? It's Imam Muhammad al-Mahdi, the 12th Imam. In the Reformer, Wisdom Revealed to Me by Master Farad Muhammad, Burnsteen Sharif Muhammad refers to Farad as our savior, the great Mahdi. In letters written in 1933, she described him she called him prophet, deliverer, savior, Jesus, Michael, Lamb of God, mighty God, everlasting Father, and Prince of Peace. So as far as Elijah Muhammad and Burnsteen Muhammad were concerned, W.D. Farad was indeed the Messiah and the Mahdi, right? So I understand that sometimes when a Muslim reads some of these things like deliverer and Lamb of God and Son of God, they don't really, it doesn't click. But anyone who grew up in a Christian tradition, these are key words. Lamb of God, that's the Messiah, okay? Right? Savior, deliverer, all of this stuff. These are all terms that are used to describe Jesus. So these are messianic titles.
Yeah, Prince of Peace as well.
And right. So now, as for the Aqidah of the Nation of Islam, right, where they say the Messiah of the Christians and the Mahdi of the Muslims, that exact formulation, maybe that's how Elijah Muhammad formulated it, but we do have it there in different terms.
Right, and I can totally see as Farad broke away from Elijah Muhammad, he was looking for other sources of information to use, and you know, he came across this. So which leads me to the next question: what about the Moorish Guide archives? Has anyone gotten a hold of those?
Bilal?
Sorry, you said which archives?
Moorish Guide.
Oh, I don't know. Moorish Guide? No, I don't think so.
Yeah, it's 19 or the Moorish Review. They're out there. I don't know if they've been put out. And then there's UNIA newspapers.
Yeah, there are some UNIA archives, I believe, in Jamaica that I was trying to get a hold of, and I wasn't successful. And I think that's still worth looking into, specifically when looking for George Farr. There was somebody that Naval Intelligence reported on. It's in the UNIA documents. George Farr was somebody that they had interviewed in the 1920s, and this could be an alias of Master Farad Muhammad. There are some differences in how the person is described. He's described as stout. Master Farad wasn't quite stout. It's possible that he went through some kind of weight fluctuation at that point. We don't know, but yeah.
There's also archives at a university in New York City. So if someone would be interested in going and conducting some research there, it's worth it. For a local person, a local student or professor, you know, it's just a few hours of research at a university there in New York. And you're looking for one thing, that name, right? And maybe he'll show up. Maybe there'll be a picture of this person. But, you know, you're not going to come back empty-handed. You're going to come back and say, no, it was a different guy. Okay, here's the picture, right? Or whatever. Or say, wow, we found him. Okay, so either way, it contributes to scholarship in the field. It helps advance our knowledge.
Right, right, right. Awesome, awesome. Now, two more things. Farad was unique. He didn't take the Jesus in India theory from the Moorish Science Temple, nor did he take their Circle 7 Quran. He didn't want anything to do with it. In fact, he was quoting the Jehovah's Witnesses when he got arrested. John, amazing find, and again, it goes back to people didn't take a look at this at the newspaper. Somehow, I mean, obviously, it wasn't available to everyone. You might have had to live in Detroit to go to the local library to go look at those archives, and then you might have broke it. You might have, maybe the microfiche weren't available, maybe it was available, but he's talking Jehovah's Witness stuff. Um, they're a multi-million-dollar operation at this point, similar to the Mormons, Seventh-day Adventists, and the Baha'is. So tell us this hodgepodge or this cocktail that Farad. Was it totally unique? Did he make his own thing, or was he really connected? Because he doesn't seem to be taking anything from anyone, but just coming up with his own bean pie, so to speak.
Well, W. de Farad's Islam was an ahiako, a harira, a stew. It was a religious salad filled with all kinds of different ingredients. There's no evidence that he identified with a single religion, ideology, or philosophy to the exclusion of others. He was the very manifestation of religious syncretism. Yeah.
Yeah.
Bilal,
Yeah, no, so yeah, he wasn't, I agree, he wasn't one thing. He was, in a sense, a free thinker, and he blended Watchtower teachings with theosophy and Garveyism and Masonry. But that said, I don't think it was strictly a scam. I don't think even the witnesses or Mormons are necessarily a scam either. I think people are complex. Their intentions are complex. They can't always be reduced to one thing. So, for example, Donald Trump, right? He's pulled off some scams. But can his entire presidency and all his motivations be reduced to a scam? I think it's more complex than that. And, Carl Evans's book, The Messenger, said that Farad had a poor fund in the temple. The poor fund supported families that were kicked off of welfare for being Muslim. John Muhammad said that Farad sold his car to pay rent for the temple. John Muhammad also said that any extra payment proceeds were, from the temple were given to Elijah Muhammad, not Farad Muhammad. And that's in our book. Master Farad Muhammad also gave gifts. He gave prizes. He gave clothing. Now, there's some disagreement on whether Farad was selling the holy names of Allah to people. Maybe he was. Maybe the money was supporting his lifestyle. He was living in hotels. He had new suits. But, he didn't have any property that we know of. He also wasn't eating much. But maybe that money was being used to build the nation. But in either case, I don't think that's enough evidence to say that he was definitely a scam artist and only that. But yeah, right. To answer your question, I mean, should religion be profitable or non-profit? I think I would say non-profit, but I also realize that you need money for seminaries and resident alims and mosques and publishing houses, and so. Yeah, sure. Maybe the state can shoulder some of that, but, a rich philanthropist. But yeah, I think you need some kind of profit element, or at least it's hard to escape such when running any kind of religious movement.
It's funny that Farad didn't find the Moors to be Islamic enough. He used to refer to them as smellers. People were just sniffing at Islam, but they weren't like deep enough into it. And then you look at his version of Islam and you're like, what? In terms of, whether he was a con man or not, it's, there's some evidence to suggest that maybe, but there's also just as much evidence to suggest that that was not the case. He did tell the police in Detroit when he was arrested that it was simply a racket. We do know that he made all kinds of money from the sale of these original names. At the same time, he was running a religious institution. He was operating a school. He had that poor funds. And yes, they raised money to buy him a new car, right? But what happened to that car? So Master Farad and Elijah Muhammad drove to the airport, reportedly, in February 1934, and Master Farad gave him his car. And so it went back to the Nation of Islam. Again, so some evidence might suggest it was a scam, but then, we have just as much evidence to suggest that it was not. So,
John Muhammad
we will avoid value judgments.
Master Farad, according to John Muhammad, Master Farad Muhammad even sold that car to pay for temple rent. That's in the Alam Khan.
Well, the first car or the second car?
I have no idea. I mean, but
because he had two cars. He had one car and it was old, and then he was raising money to get a new car. And then apparently a white man gave him a car. Now, the only white man, I think, who could have afforded to give him a car was Wally White, right? Wally Muhammad. And still, that's pretty weird to me. Like, a man buying another man a car. I find it a little bit, it's, I don't know.
He may have had other connections, right? Like other elites. Yeah,
it could be. It's all very strange. He was an engineer. He was middle class. He did live in a nice neighborhood. But as a result of the Great Depression, he ended up being a grocer. He was operating a grocery store out of his home at the time those picnics were going on. But we can talk about him later.
Yeah, we'll get to him. I forgot what I was gonna say, but no worries. So okay. You wrote in there, and this it caught my eye. All organized religions are a scam. Now, is that because the U.S. government has made religion a business, or they allow freedom of religion allows anyone, I mean anyone, to create their own? What do they call it? They call it social entrepreneurship. Is that the academic term?
Right. Yeah.
So now, and as you know, in like the Mughal Empire, in like these Islamic empires, you couldn't just really do that. It wasn't really allowed. You got to be with the state, and the state might even provide an imam, and they're monitoring religion. But once you open the flood doors, is that what you mean? Please elaborate.
Well, so I don't take issue with like spiritual traditions. All right. And prophets and their teachings. But when that becomes like an institution and you run it like a business, and there's a motivation for profits, and you become associated with the state or part of the state infrastructure. It's a question of power and authority, and yeah, the spiritual origin, a lot of the good and the positive things, they just vanish. So yes, organized religion has caused an enormous amount of harm. It's also caused an enormous amount of good as well. But when it's institutionalized, yes, it could degenerate. And the examples are endless. I mean, Christianity became the religion of an empire that persecuted anyone who didn't agree with their dogmas and their doctrines, and so those people were exterminated. It was imposed upon indigenous people in the Americas. It was at the forefront of one of the worst genocides the world has ever seen. We're talking about 100 million indigenous people butchered by the Spaniards. And then slavery was very much justified in the name of Christianity. So there we go, another 80 million Black people. So yes, and you'll see many states and nations in the world today using religion to oppress people, to persecute, imprison, and kill people. So that's what I'm criticizing. So I'm criticizing human beings. I'm not criticizing religion and spirituality or any of that. Just the faults of frail and fallen human beings. Yeah.
Right. And you
Now,
know,
I'm not dissing Jesus and what he taught, and I'm not dissing the Prophet Muhammad. No, but many people have done horrible things in their name. That's what I'm talking about. I'm a very spiritual person.
yeah, and like the televangelist, I've always
Oh,
said most massages should stay local. You know what I mean? Anyone who's going national, you're creating a national following. You know, it should be relegated to stay local. Help your
right,
local
like
people.
the amount of abuse that took place in Christian operated residential schools in Canada and the United States really it chills your blood. If you look at the history of child abuse perpetrated by priests and also nuns and so on, and how it was known for decades and decades and decades and decades. And instead of prosecuting these people, they covered up their crimes. They would move them from one diocese to another one, right? So that they would, continue abusing children somewhere else because they were about to be lynched by the community. So, yeah. I mean, yeah, yeah,
Got to be careful out here. Look, I tell everyone,
yeah,
just because it sounds good doesn't mean it is good. You know,
right,
Shaitan sounds really good. You know, when you late at night in your ear, Shaitan
yeah,
sounds good. You know, but he's not.
right.
You
And you find a lot of institutionalized, organized religions. They're basically violating all of their ethical and moral values and principles. Yeah,
Totally. So I grew up in the Ahmadiyya movement. My dad had a tire shop. He's giving all his money away. And hey, do whatever with your money, what you want. But like, you're not paying me. I'm like 16 at this point, and I'm seeing what's going on. And I'm like, why do I have to work 7 days a week? And like, my peers are on the baseball team. You know, I'm not following this. Like, why am I being forced to work? Well, because he has to give them their cut of the subscription, whatever you want to call it, just to maintain his identity or whatever you want to call it. So, you know, some people maintain the identity through financial means. You know, he'd also take us on Sunday to go work at the temple. You know, then
right.
and now we got to clean up.
So there's a lot of that, and some people tell me, well, that type of abuse doesn't exist at the level of the tariqa, right? Because it's not an institution and so on. But that's not true. I mean, many of my friends and colleagues who spent decades following all kinds of murshids and Sufi guides and so on, they experienced the very same thing.
Yeah.
One colleague of mine, he was following the leader of a major Sufi order, and who turned out to be a child abuser and a pedophile. The other one, he turned out to be a pederast who was involved with young boys. And everyone in this tariqah had to give taif. It's kind of like you're giving khums or something. You give 10, 20% of your income. It goes to your sheikh or your peer or your murshid or whatever, or your marja or whatever. And you expect and you trust that these people will spend the money in a righteous way and a fitting way. And, it was the wife of this Sufi guide who broke the news to his followers that my husband is cheating on me with teenage boys. And on top of that, this is what he's doing with your money. He was living the life of a playboy. He bought himself a yacht. Really? Maybe you fund an Islamic school, a charity, a food bank. But if your zakat and your khums and your sadaqah is going to someone so he can live the life of a playboy, yes, yeah, I don't think so.
Yeah, it's not going to work.
It's a question of transparency and accountability.
Yeah, or they just slip something in your drink, and then we got the Diddy case. Right? Your bean pie could have a little something extra in it that night, and now who knows what now it's Diddy, and Diddy beat the RICO, by the way. So he's coming home soon. But it seems like if you have money, this is what. And same thing, Diddy had everything in his mom's name. So who are you gonna sue? So with Diddy, he's ready for it. That's why I'm not understanding. Wally Ford, you're running a school, bro. You're gonna get caught. There's 100 kids who come in and go every day. Okay, someone's gonna notice and say, why are there 100 kids on top of this theater, this old theater? What are they doing in there?
Yes, and yeah, I mean, in hindsight, it seems obvious that they were going to get busted, and we have all of the accounts of that in the newspapers. Why? I mean, it's not like the government had issues with a private school. It had an issue with the fact that it wasn't licensed and it was being operated underground, and that the teachers were not qualified. I mean, there were people. The standards weren't that high back then. Basically, if you had a high school education, you could be a teacher. But these are people who had grade 2 and grade 3 education, and they were teaching grades, kindergarten, all the way to grade 8 or whatever, or maybe all the way to grade 12. I don't remember. So those were, and of course they frame it, it's racist, just racism. No, I think the state did have some genuine concerns about the quality of the education that was being imparted. And just like, preaching white supremacy and so on and racism might not fly in a public school, even at that time. Some of the teachings that the white man is the devil and this and that, and we need to sacrifice devils. Obviously, that doesn't fly in a private school either. So there were concerns, understandably so. He should have foreseen these things. Or was he just middle fingering, America? I don't know, the system. Right,
well, but that's not the proper middle finger. You gave him the wrong finger. If he was really going to do it, he would have not got caught and built it up stronger. And then,
yeah, it's interesting.
And in fact, it totally collapsed by 1950. It's done. There's nothing left. Just Elijah Muhammad's paying his bills. Maybe he rented a place. Who knows?
Hatem Taib was 51, so he gives you the very detailed snapshot of the movement in 51.
Yeah, it's not much anymore. So
it's about 400 followers.
Yeah, and if you think out of the 400, only 100 are giving financial contribution, right? You can't think everyone's giving you something, and there's probably a few rich people in there who will give you a little bit more, but they want skin in the game too, like they might want a position.
He actually gives a sample of how much education. So he has a sample of people, and he tells you how many. This is the Hatem Taib 1951 thesis. He tells you what grades they had graduated from, and so most of them, 80-90% of them did not graduate from high school. John Muhammad was running the University of Islam in 1932, and he did not finish high school. He was not an academic himself. Of course, Elijah Muhammad famously went to the 3rd grade, completed the 3rd grade of school. Yeah, so this was, and a lot of this is just the conditions of that time, at the height of Jim Crow. The would go after this movement too.
Right. But, so I had a Mexican friend who was from Oakland who could barely read and write. Okay. And he used to blame the schools. And I'd be like, dude, it's not the schools. What are you doing when you're off? You didn't even read the newspaper. Like, you guys, so my friends would be like, dude, you're not a gangster. You read the newspapers. I'd be like, my bad. What else are we doing today? We got like 7 hours, dude. What are you gonna do? How much can we rap back and forth? We can't rap all day, man. I'm gonna read this newspaper because I got nothing else to do, and it's interesting stuff in there. So I've seen people, like, even now, online versus face to face. Some people they cannot do online because they can't teach themselves. I'm like, bro, if you're the kind of, in the future, if you're the type of human who needs 10 people to stop everything they're doing in their life and come teach you how to read, you're asking a lot. You shouldn't be asking that.
You're gonna send them a video too?
Yeah, like why are you asking for the world to stop just so you could read? How about you go out there and try to read it yourself and bang your head against the wall for hours and hours? That's how I learned everything.
That's why people always. I get this question frequently where it's like, how do you, do you have any advice for me on how to read a book? I'm like, I don't know, man. You pick it up and you just start reading it, and you'll figure it out. Okay, you'll figure out how much you can do, how often, how long it'll take you to finish a page. You'll figure it out. But That's how you start. You start by opening it. That's how
Yeah,
you start.
step one is to actually have the book. Then, you know, there's so many things, so many rabbit holes you can go down. The moon landing, all that's up for debate these days. You know, there's a lot of new information that came out about the moon landing, about technology. Do we really have this capacity? Is there really a Van Allen a radiation belt surrounding Earth that'll kill any human who tries to leave? You know, so what are you interested in? You know, they just want a fiesta. Right? I'm like, okay, bro, go do fiesta, but how many years do you need? You know, I like peace and quiet in my 40s. You know what I mean? You know, how many years of fiesta? This loud noise, and you know, in Mexico, it's a lot of noise. Like you're not sleeping tonight. You know, but okay. I guess everyone's made a certain way. Allah said He wrote it. He wrote When We're Gonna Die. He wrote the job we're gonna do, and that's just how people are. So my mom is a voracious reader, but she just read. You know, it was the weird. I've told her the problem with your hobby is you lay down for 4 hours, and then you're not burning any calories. You're not even, you know, so you might, you know, be overweight. That's a big side effect of this habit. You know,
Yeah, you could read while walking on a treadmill.
You know, or you know, I read, you know, PDF, like I'm like this and I'm reading and I'm scrolling, you know what I mean, instead of sitting down. So
yeah, no, you could do audiobooks. You could listen in your car or at the gym.
There's so many options.
I read How to Eat to Live at the gym. Not How to Eat to Live, sorry. Message to the Black Man. I had that on audiobook. I read it in the gym.
Yeah, on the treadmill, bro. Get on the Stairmaster. You know, there's so many. Like the world has changed in a lot of bad ways, but a lot of good ways too. So you know, students will ask me all the time about referencing, and I'm like, dude, if I have to tell you that there should be a reference in every paragraph of what you had to write. You know, you're a newbie, so you got to quote other people extensively. Yeah. Even the people who are seasoned are quoting someone else in every paragraph. There's someone there.
We have over 800 references in this book.
Right. So it's like, you know, and then you tie it all up, you know. So okay. So moving on here to question number 5. Les Payne. Les Payne wrote the book, and he said that what if Farad described himself to Elijah as a member of the Ahmadiyya movement? There's no way. Who can help us on this one?
Well, who said that Farad identified himself as a member of the Ahmadiyya? That's the question. Les Payne does not provide a source. Was it John Muhammad? Was it Nathaniel Muhammad? In an interview conducted in 1993 and 2015, this is when they were interviewed. The interviews exist. I requested them from Tamara Payne. She said they were unavailable. Well, why? Back up your claims, cite your sources, provide your references. A Pulitzer Prize winner who fails to provide proper bibliographical references, that's a mortal sin in scholarship. And your other question that you had sent me was, why was the book published so late? Well, it's pretty hard to finish a book when you're dead. Les Payne died in 2018. The book was published in 2020. He started researching the biography in 1990, and he had to hire several researchers, including his daughter, to help him. It took nearly 30 years to research and write the book. I mean, what can I say? The man, may rest in peace, was slow, or he was very busy with other projects. Some scholars write 1, 2, or even 3 books per year, rigorously researched and meticulously referenced academic titles. Of course, it's not the quantity that counts, it's quality, but some scholars succeed in doing both.
Sounds good. Yeah, I totally get it. And in my opinion, I feel like he fell under the propaganda of the repackaging. And someone said, "Oh yeah, he said he met him." Dude, look at dude, this guy. You're talking this guy. That's fraud with the receding hairline. You know, right? Because you can see the receding hair. Look, it's probably gonna happen to me. You know what I mean? It's gonna look. So this is not the same guy. You know, it's not even close. It's not even close. So okay, and you know, maybe they didn't see the photo no worries. And so I asked another question about Turner in the photo, Fanusie in the photo. Then we jumped to question number 7. Why was Elijah Muhammad arrested in 1942? And John Muhammad said Willie Thomas White was light skinned. So was Elijah. Elijah was light skinned. That's light skinned. And so is John. Okay. And they might not have had white maybe a grandfather or a great grandfather, but they're light skinned. You know, they're not blue black, or the common phraseology for someone who's straight out of Africa is a darker complexion. And Elijah Muhammad was arrested for a draft dodging.
Yeah. So I can clarify this. Yeah. So draft dodging was the official charge. Yes. Elijah was just technically old enough to be drafted. He would have been 45 in 1942, and the draft was expanded that year to include people who are exactly 45 years of age. So yes, I mean, Elijah Muhammad did object to the draft, but he objected for moral reasons. He was against the war, and I have no reason to doubt his sincerity in being against that war, you know, not being for America and such. But yeah, the government didn't accept that reason. They put him in jail for 4 years. And if you remember, Muhammad Ali was famously, you know, he famously didn't go to jail for refusing the Vietnam War draft because he was a conscientious objector. So why didn't the FBI accept Elijah Muhammad's conscientious objection? You know, the FBI files show that the U.S. government was very concerned with the Nation of Islam's connections with Imperial Japan. Elijah would preach that the Japanese would slaughter the white man. Major Takahashi was connected to the nation in the 30s. One of the early FBI hypotheses was that Farad was an important figure in the Japanese military. One FBI dossier thought that he was a Nazi agent as well. The FBI and the Selective Service Board was, you know, it didn't accept Nation of Islam as a religious group. They saw it as a subversive group and a political group and a racial group. So I strongly suspect that Elijah was, you know, something of a political prisoner, someone that the FBI was tracking, whose religion was not accepted as a religion, who was opposed to the war for moral reasons, and who was also like almost too old for the draft anyway, and could have come up with a million different health reasons why he couldn't join. So yeah, I mean, that's why I wrote that he was indicted, probably because of his sympathies with Japan.
Yeah, but they didn't arrest the leader of the Jehovah's Witnesses. Right.
Well, you talking about Rutherford?
Yeah, was he alive in full?
I think he would have been too old anyway.
He would have been too old. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. But and then so I was in the U.S. Air Force. I've seen guys fake injuries to not go on a deployment. Like, oh, my knee, your knee, what?
Was it Trump who had the bone sprouts or something?
Bone sprout.
Yeah, bone spurs. Yeah.
So when 9/11 happened, I was like 21, 22. I wasn't getting out of it. I was on like the flag football team, the basketball team, growler, so I wasn't getting out of anything. But that's funny. And then even on the way back, so once they release you, so okay, we're sending a few people back. Few people would start to get injured, because if you get injured, now you're on the top of the list to go. Whether it's guys. So I thought that was interesting. Seemed like they were targeting in 42. How many members did he have? He didn't have that many members in 42 to be.
I mean, the COINTELPRO was clearly on his ass, and they were on Farad's ass, and they were on Takahashi's ass, and I do feel, again, like they were explicitly saying things like Japan was the empire of the rising, that it was a sun rising from the west. Everyone knows the hadith of the prophet that before the end times, the sun will rise from the west. Elijah Muhammad was preaching that Japan was the sun rising from the west. If you don't believe me, go to my channel. I have a video of Louis Farrakhan saying this, and saying that Elijah Muhammad was associated with Major Takahashi as well. So they, and of course the symbol of Imperial Japan was a sun. And them attacking, Pearl Harbor, So I mean, I think that the connection with Japan is there, even if, I mean, that doesn't mean Farad was a Japanese agent necessarily. More research needs to be done in Japan proper.
Yeah, and apparently, maybe people didn't know, but Japan didn't have any oil nor did they have coal for electricity. So
that's why they nuked it instead of invading.
Because there was nothing. Same thing with Germany. They had the same problem. You know, the reason America became what it is today is because the oil in Texas and California. You know, and if it really wasn't for the oil, the level amount of oil, and the Mississippi River, the Gulf, the GDP coming out of the Gulf, you know, like they're not going to lose. Like America knew that we're not losing this one because we just cut the oil and these guys are dead in the water. You know, it doesn't matter how nice your aircraft carrier is. If it ain't got any oil, it's just an artifact. It's just going to sit there. So when I was in the Air Force, so I worked on aerial refuelers, and we used to say you can't kick ass without tanker gas. So we knew without. So Japan was just spinning its wheels. You know, they never had a shot. Okay, they tried something. Ha ha ha. It didn't work. It wasn't going to work. You know, and it was almost the introduction that America needed. You know, oh, you bombed our territory, overseas territory. Didn't really do any, you know, the Navy seemed to know about it. And they had half the ships out to sea that day, you know, doing an exercise. So, okay, you knocked over a few ships. Well, now you allowed America to get the people behind them. And now they're going after everyone. So,
right.
That's interesting.
So I was going to say, should we do a part 2 for this? I know it's getting really long.
No, I don't have anything to do today, so I live a simple life, brother. I live a simple life.
I've seen that we have so many questions left, and I might have to go soon. I mean, I don't want to be that person, but
no worries. Yeah. Let's see how much we can get through, and if you have to go, no worries. But I know we've been through a lot already.
I got about 10 more minutes.
Got it. So okay. So which ones so you've seen the questions? Which ones do you want to answer?
Well, we could go right to the next one.
Okay, 1 meal a day. Farad didn't sleep. I know what drugs those are.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, so the 1 meal a day thing first. You know, there were health reformers in the 20s and 30s. You had, you know, Bernard McFadden and John Harvey Kellogg, and they were promoting diets that were kind of similar to Farad's, not exactly, but, you know, going long periods without food, also like quasi-vegetarian diets. But yeah, Supreme Minister John Muhammad said that Master Fard Muhammad never prayed. He said that, you know, that was proof that he was God, that he didn't pray. You know, I just say that that's proof that he was not an Orthodox Muslim, or even an Ahmadi, or an Ahmadi Muslim. You know, I'm assuming he wasn't meditating either. Maybe he wasn't religious. You know, remember, they didn't have a lot of atheists in those days, but there were plenty of people who were nominally religious, or they had naturalist or materialist views, or reformist views on religion. But yeah, I mean, maybe he did believe he was God, or maybe he believed he was part of God. You know, make of that what you will. As for Farad not sleeping, how is that possible? Well, the Nation of Islam would say that Allah doesn't sleep. He ate, but he doesn't sleep. But the more correct statement is to say that his followers didn't see him sleeping, or they reportedly never saw him sleeping. John Muhammad said that Farad Muhammad's bed was always made. And Elijah Muhammad said that he once tried to peep through the keyhole to see Farad's room to try to catch a glimpse of him sleeping. But then when he looked, he saw Farad looking at him from the other side. So, you know, Malcolm X said that Master Farad Muhammad would sometimes spend 24 hours a day teaching. He probably got that from Elijah. Elijah Muhammad said that he would study with Farad day and night, and Farad would give him coffee to stay awake. So, you know, maybe Farad had bipolar 1. That's possible. Patients who have bipolar 1, they go through episodes where they don't sleep. Bipolar 1 didn't exist as a diagnosis until the 80s. But the problem is that those patients, they then crash and they make up for that sleep after a while. But hey, you know, there were periods of time where Master Farad Muhammad was away from the nation. So maybe he was catching up on sleep in that time. But yeah, another possibility is cocaine. And yes, he apparently had packets of sugar with him. Maybe that wasn't sugar.
Yeah, and apparently he never woke up for Fajr. Right.
Apparently not.
dude, you didn't wake up for Fajr, and then look, so I woke up for Fajr and a lot, even now, and I'd meet like older men back in the days who'd be regimented, make me wake up for Fajr as a teenager, and come to find out, because I had to work all day, I'd be like, you guys sleep from like 1 to 4. They were like, yeah, really? Then why do you keep me up after Fajr, dude? Let me go back to sleep, because I don't. Like, how is this even fair? Why are you putting this on me? That I just because you're an older man who wakes up naturally at 4 a.m. every day, okay? You wake up like it's clockwork, but then you nap later in the afternoon. You know, something's got to be equivalent. You know, you got to break it down. I don't think they understood what I was talking about. So maybe, you know, he's up all night. That sounds about, you know, how many friends I got who if I go to play basketball, they can't play one game. They're done. But if you hang out with them, like, dude, when your knees aren't hurting, man? How are your knees not hurting, man? Mine aren't hurting, but they're feeling a little wobbly, you know? Normally I get the wobbly and then I lay down and then I'm just gone, you know? So the mythology there is interesting. Then the accent and babies that aren't his, and how many women does the guy have?
Yeah, so let's start with the accent. So originally it was unclear if Master Farad had an accent. The data points suggest that he does. So let's go over that. So number one, John Muhammad said that he spoke foreign-like, and that Elijah would emulate that accent when he wanted to fix his words and speak clearly. And yeah, Elijah Muhammad did speak in a peculiar way. It's not typical of someone from Georgia. Some have likened his accent to an Indian accent. I don't know. Allah knows best. The second point is that Medina Muhammad said that her mother, Sister Burnsteen Sharif Muhammad, the reformer, the secretary of Master Farad Muhammad, said that Farad had a very thick accent and that he would say things like, instead of, you know, here and there, he would say here and here. Okay, so, you know, he would also frequently say, quote, I hope you are understanding what I'm trying to tell you. So he was always checking in to make sure everyone was getting him. Number three, everyone who met Farad described him as being a foreigner of some kind. So he was called a Turk, a Greek, an Arab, a Syrian, a Spaniard, et cetera, et cetera. And number four, Farad's writing has grammatical and spelling errors in it, which suggests that English was a second language. And the forensic linguistic analysis determined that English was a second language and that his first language was probably Urdu. Now, as for Farad's children, he only had one known child with Hazel Barton. That child died as a young man in a drowning accident in the U.S. military. He had no kids. And there was a child that came after his union with Pearl Allen. My DNA analysis in the book would suggest that it wasn't Farad's child, but maybe Farad thought it was his child. Hazel Barton in the FBI file allegedly found out about this child, and Farad seemed to have visited this child in July 1933. And there were rumors in the Campagna family that I contacted. There were rumors that they might be related to Farad. But again, either way, it appears that Farad, you know, he left these children behind in 33. There's no proof that he connected with them ever again. And yeah, I mean, maybe, you know, the stepfathers or biological fathers, you know, stepped in and said, hey, back off, right? Who knows? But yeah, as for white women, yeah, I mean, Farad was involved. Laura Swanson, who was white. Pearl Allen was part white. Hazel Barton was white. And, you know, he had bad experiences with all of them. Laura Swanson was accusing him of rape. He was found not guilty. Pearl Allen cheated on him and stole money from him, and she was a drunk. And Hazel Barton was involved in the crime world. So maybe these women, you know, they solidified Master Farad Muhammad's views on white people.
Yeah, and he's a pimp. I mean, I have to say it. If you look at how he dressed, you know, he reminds me of a rapper, Sugar Free. You remember Sugar Free from California? You know, if you stay ready, you ain't got to get ready. You know what I mean? Stuff
I'm
like
not as hip as you guys.
But you know, from the way he dressed to all of that, you know, he seems like he's a talker. He's a talker, like Vince Vaughn. How about Vince Vaughn? You know Vince Vaughn is?
Yeah, I know Vince Vaughn. Yeah.
Wedding Crashers. This guy will talk you into anything.
Yeah.
He'll talk you into anything. Sell water to a whale. Okay. So okay. Then I think we talked about this before. Why was WD convinced that Farad was a white man? He was convinced in that video. He confronted his mom, the whole falling out. Why was he convinced? And how much did he know? Because he did water down, and then he hired Muhammad Abdullah in the Bay Area, et cetera, et cetera. If you can elaborate.
Yeah, so Imam Warith ad-Din taught, or rather he was taught as a young man, that Master Fard Muhammad was at least half white. So Master Farad's picture also doesn't look half black, right? For context, Barack Obama is half black, Halle Berry, Drake, Colin Kaepernick, Alicia Keys, these are all people who are half black. Farad doesn't really fit the bill so much. Warith ad-Din in his early years taught that Farad was a witch doctor, right? A Jekyll and Hyde character. And then later he would say that Maulana Muhammad Abdullah, the Ahmedi from California, was Master Fard Muhammad. But yeah, I mean, let's face it, Warith ad-Din never met Farad. And Imam Warith ad-Din, with all due respect to him, may Allah have mercy on him, he had daddy issues. Master Farad came, he took his dad away from him. Elijah was preaching away from home for 8 years. He went to jail for 4 years. All of this because of Master Fard Muhammad. Imam Warith ad-Din told his nephew, Hassan Sharif, quote, "If Farad was standing in front of me right now, Hassan, I'd grab that dude in his collar and I'd snatch him out of his shoes." So, yeah, I mean, he had a lot of resentment for Farad. He was, Farad basically destroyed his family, and he was teaching this unorthodox interpretation of Islam as well. And manifesting Farad in the person of Muhammad Abdullah, maybe that was like the only way he could come to terms or, be at peace with all of it. So that's my theory.
Yeah, on one occasion he described him as a jinn.
Jinni. So yeah. So he had some issues, and that it bled. It bled a lot in the 70s and the 80s, and of course Burnsteen took one side, and John Muhammad was on. I actually don't know what side he was on. Maybe somewhere in the middle. But okay, let's keep moving here. The Muhammad.
I will have to go, but I think the rest of the questions are for Dr. Morrow anyway. So I guess Dr. Morrow, you can take over, inshallah.
Sure. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for interviewing me as well. Thanks for coming, Dr. Morrow. Thanks for inviting me, Dr. Bashir. And inshallah, very, very soon and within our days, we'll be coming out with the sequel.
Sounds good. And on YouTube, you can find the brother Bilal's Boulder. He's got a lot of good information. And I tell people to try to sit amongst the scholars, amongst the academics, if you want to learn. It's a highway to information. And yet, thank you so much for coming, brother. And in the future, we got a lot of collaboration coming up.
You're a scholar. Also, if you can't afford the book, you can always request it from your library or your school or your university library. The acquisitions departments will be able to acquire it. So again, buy the book. If you can't, just request your library to get it, and you'll be able to benefit yourself and others.
Gee,
all right, with that, thank you so much. Wassalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam fi amanillah.
You too.
Love that, brother, man. Thanks for introducing us. I wanted to ask him one question at the end. I'm going to save it. Because it's sort of amusing. So, okay. Let me just write that down. All right. So we're coming down the home stretch. And then the Muhammad. And in the 1940s, Elijah Muhammad went by that alias. And then I saw it again, which was surprising. I'm not sure what context I saw it in, but if you can elaborate on the Muhammad, the additional new information on Muhammad.
Right. John Muhammad, the brother of Elijah Muhammad and an early minister in the Nation of Islam, insisted that W.D. Farad did not say Muhammad, but Muhammad. Or was it Muhammad? This is beyond bizarre. Elijah Muhammad, John Muhammad, apparently the entire Poole family had speech impediments. Okay. So Elijah can be excused for saying the Quran instead of the Quran. But Farad, to all evidence, he was an articulate and educated man. Was he right? Was he deliberately mispronouncing Muhammad's name? Or was he saying Mahmud, which is a synonym for Muhammad? Mahmud, Mukmud, Mahmud. I think it's probably Mahmud, which means praised, but Allahu Alam.
Right, right.
Right.
You know, normally it's a mispronunciation, you know, and we talked about the mispronunciation from the Desi community with the D's and the Z's, you know.
Yeah, Walad Zaleen and all of that stuff, but I've never heard a Pakistani or an Indian like Mangle Muhammad,
No,
right? I've never.
not at all.
Yeah.
So that was a
You know,
curveball. No worries though. You
yeah.
know, it's just another fact. Maybe you know, because didn't Elijah Muhammad use that nickname in the 40s?
Oh, yes.
So there's additional corroboration, even
Right.
from Elijah, from John. So both of them heard it. Both of them started using it, maybe as a nickname. Like, so my name is Bashir, and the Polynesians I grew up with couldn't say it. So they'd say Bushir, Bush as in a bush, and then it just came down to Bush. And then for years, I'm just Bush. They're like, "What's his name?" Bush. And
Right. And so the FBI file has like 60 different aliases for Master Farad. I believe one of them is Mukmud. So they did get that from other people as well, not just from John and Elijah. It was corroborated that this was one of the names. It's
right, and
unusual.
that can have. So look, I grew up in a Desi environment, and I can understand Urdu, but the reading and writing isn't there. You know, and I'm advanced. You know, the generation after me, forget it. They're barely understanding it. You know, so Farad, maybe his dad was a Desi man and his mom was a white. Because if your mother is white, in this scenario, you're not going to learn any of it the proper. You know, but for example, if you have a black mother, she's going to cook for you, and you're going to learn what it's like to have a black mother, whereas opposed to a Mexican or a white mother, it's a different, totally different.
Right. It is.
So
Yeah.
so maybe or maybe he wasn't around his parents and he didn't get that. You know, some Polynesians are so away from their culture at this point that they've forgot even to sing the song. They don't know how to sing the song. Like, you'll see a Tongan rapper and you'll be like, but he doesn't sit around, drink the kava, and sing the songs with them anymore. You know,
Right.
so it's when you're coming out of the culture and the things that come with it. Maybe I don't know. So okay, moving on here. The linguistics. Now, I looked and looked and looked, and I could not find the reference, but I thought I had read many years ago that Urdu had so much written literature in the early 1900s that it impermeated society, and based on the language that's in the newspapers, from the English, even from the Ahmadiyya newspapers, that's the language that maybe the UNIA also use the same nomenclatures, the same specific wording, like you said. The lamb of the is like specific, and the deliverer, like to me, it might not mean anything, but if you know, if it's your language, if it's your things that you understand, then so I'm thinking for the linguistics, it could be that that Urdu was the lingua franca. So for example, Ahmadiyya literature went to every British colony, but it didn't go to the French colonies. The French colonies
Right.
didn't allow it.
Mhm.
The Portuguese didn't allow it. The Dutch started to allow it in the 1920s in Indonesia, in Suriname. You know, so maybe it affected the language. You know, language in America is affected even by rap music. You know,
Yeah.
there's different factors that could affect what language is being used. So on the linguistics, would I say that it was just what's in the air at that
Yes.
specific
Mhm.
moment, more than what's connected to him? Because I mean, if you think about it, there's more Arabs in Dearborn, Detroit, than any other demographic
Absolutely. It's the biggest Arab community outside of the Arab world. It's huge.
Right, and but they didn't produce much literature.
No, not at all. Not at all.
And
No,
didn't John Muhammad say they wouldn't even talk to us?
exactly.
So so
And
that so that's
it's
out.
still very segregated to this day. Detroit and Dearborn. There's Black Detroit and there's Lebanese Dearborn. You know, it's like crossing the proverbial train track. It's day and night. That's the reality.
Yeah. So I'm thinking, my hunch is that that's just what was in the air. British India, a lot of literature coming out in the Urdu language, which that wouldn't affect anything in America. But if that's translated into English with some of the names, Kashmir was one of the names.
Yeah,
Um, the Ahmadiyya theory that Jesus alayhi died in Kashmir.
right.
But the MST didn't take that. The UNIA didn't take that. Farad would have scoffed at it, honestly. If you ask me, he'll be like, "Oh, forget all that." He'd say, "Forget that whole line of argumentation or reason. We need to go down a different road." So,
Right.
what do you think about my repackaging of the linguistics?
Sure. I mean, the Ahmadis were the first Muslims to engage in large scale Islamic proselytization in the English language. They were the first Muslim group to engage in large scale organized dawah in the Western world. They produced high quality translations and publications, right? They had professional translators. They were highly educated, not like this other garbage that's come out of the Arab world or from Iran and so on. These are good books. They drew many Westerners into Islam. They had a profound influence on Islam in the Western English-speaking world in the early 20th century. There are many Black, white, and Latino Muslim families in the United States and Canada and in Europe and England who descend from people who learned about Islam through the Ahmadis, just like many Blacks came into Islam through the Nation of Islam. They had a parent, they had a grandparent, they might be Sunnis, they might be Sufis, they might be Shia now, they're Orthodox Muslims, more or less. Some are still Ahmadis who go back. They're like 3 generations, 4 generations. A lot of early like jazz musicians became Ahmadi Muslims. They really didn't understand the difference between Ahmadis, Sunni, Shi'i. It was just Islam to them. It was what was available. So many Muslims are grateful for the efforts of the Ahmadis and the Nation of Islam, because without them, they wouldn't be Muslim today. So for them, it's part of an evolutionary process.
Yeah. So let's go to Sir William Muir. Um, how much of his work have you read? And remember, he was in India. He wrote a lot. Like, I remember 20 years ago, one of the first few things I read on the internet was Sir William Muir, and he wrote about the Quran in so
Right,
much detail. I just couldn't believe he wrote about the life of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He spelled Muhammad with a T on the end,
right. Yeah,
right? And I was just I read, and now I gotta go back and read it. But that was he, like, I think he even wrote a comment. So, and then Sir Syed Ahmad Khan. So it seems like this whole Islamic repackaging, or because there was a huge watershed moment in India in 1857. The British lost a huge war of independence, and that made them rethink what they wanted Islam to be. Sir Syed Ahmad Khan was the Quranist. No jihad. There's no reason for jihad, etc. Let's just stick to the Quran. Let's give away the tradition. Because in the tradition, a lot of specifics, but if you stick to the Quran, now you can wiggle out of this, or you want to wiggle out of that, or whatever it might be, So, tell me about Sir William Muir and his influence on all of this.
well, there was some Orientalist literature that was available in English. And it's quite possible, since Farad was a bibliophile and he used to go to bookstores and the public library, that he read some of this literature. For example, The Mystics of Islam, which was published in, when was it? 1914, 1917 or something. And it gives an overview of like Rumi and Ibn Arabi and Al-Hallaj and all of their teachings, including this famous quote, Ana al-Haq, I am the truth, I am the reality, I am at one with God. So I wouldn't be surprised if Master Farad was reading those books, because if you consider all of these books that he recommended to Elijah in the Library of Congress, he was very well read. Most of it was Orientalist religion. So he's clearly drawing from those sources.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Okay, moving along here. Okay.
Yeah, we could jump to Wally Muhammad, and I can go right into it if you want.
Yeah. And so the first question I have is actually question number 13 is did you look up 504 Woodside Avenue in Ferndale?
I didn't, but I could. Yeah. And in terms of like searching addresses, well, of course, you can go to newspapers.com, put in your address, and as long as you know the city, if anything comes up, it's going to come up. And where would it come up? Quite often in classified ads. I'm selling a fridge, I'm selling an oven, and then you have the address and you have the person's name and their phone number. That's one way of doing it. But the other way, and you know this, but younger people don't know this, there was something called the telephone book. Did you have telephone book? Yes, you're in your 40s. You know about telephone books. But
no, if you wanted a job, you got to go to the newspaper.
Exactly. But so if you want to know where someone lived at any given point in time, all you have to do is look up city directories. There were phone books for every single year. And so these people I investigate, if I want to know where they lived, well, I go to the phone book. Oh, he was at this address in this year. A few years later, he moved to this address. So that's how you could handle the issue of addresses. And you would have this in other records as well. If you look up birth certificates, you're going to have addresses, marriage certificates, divorce records, all of these things. And so you can corroborate, you can confirm, you can verify that you got the right person, you got the right address.
Got it. So okay. On April 19th, Wally Muhammad, age 33, was arrested. No, he wasn't arrested. He was arraigned. He wasn't part of the arrest 2 days earlier, but he was part of the arraignment, claiming he was a teacher with the school. Who is this guy?
Okay, so yeah. Now, there were several people with the same names in this community, and so it's confusing. You have Wally Muhammad, you have Willie Muhammad, one's a black guy, one's a white guy, and so on. So I'm just going to give you an overview of this. So the Wally Muhammad, who was in charge of the Detroit Temple, was the brother of Elijah Muhammad. Okay? His name was Willie Muhammad. All right?
Willie Poole.
Yes, Willie Poole. Willie Muhammad. And the thing is, a lot of these people, they changed their names several times during their life. And so that, again, adds to the confusion, because sometimes, like, when did this guy die? He just disappears. He didn't disappear. He changed his last name again. Some of them, so, you know, his name might have been William Muhammad. He was known as Willie Muhammad, in Arabic known as Wally Muhammad. He had previously been known as William Poole or whatever. And then later in his life, he changed his name back from Muhammad to Poole, right? So that's how you can lose track of people. Now, so he's not to be confused with Wally Muhammad, namely William Thomas White, Tom White, and Wally White. And, you know, I can get you an actual photograph of him, who was a friend and disciple of W.D. Farad, the teacher of John Muhammad, and an early teacher in the University of Islam. Now, Willie and Wally are used interchangeably. At times, it's difficult to distinguish who the newspapers are talking about. So then you rely on other things. Age, all right? That's how you're going to figure out who is who. If I recall correctly, William or Willie Poole Jr., the brother of Elijah Muhammad, who was black, was born on August 5th, 1891 in Georgia, and died in Detroit, Michigan on January 29, 1944, at the age of 52. Okay, so you know he died in 44 at the age of 52. And so you have to base yourself on that, the date of his death or the date of his birth, to figure out who they're talking about. That was just 2 years after his father. He was also known as Billy, right? Billy Muhammad, Billy Poole. As for the other Wally Muhammad, namely Wally White, the white Muslim, he was born in 1869 and died in 1938. In the book, I mentioned that he disappeared at the same time as W.D. Farad, and according to his family, he went to South America. All right, so that was very suspicious. 2 men, 2 friends, 2 associates who disappear from Detroit at the same time, both of whom are alleged to have gone to Latin America. Was that Mexico? His family suggested he went to Brazil. I was able to get a city they thought he went to. I went there. I contacted the city. They went through I couldn't find any trace of this guy in Brazil. Couldn't find any trace of him in Mexico. But eventually I did track him down. He died in 1938. He is buried in Detroit. So he was around 70 years of age when he died. So he's 70 in 1938. So he's certainly not someone who's like 30 years old just a few years before that who got arrested. That has to be a different person. So in 1934, Wally Poole was 43 years old. And Wally White was 65 years old. So perhaps that can help with your research. As for Wally White, he lived at 3190 Woodward, and then at 80 Wanda Street, where he had a grocery store. How did I find his address? City directories, marriage and divorce records, birth records, newspapers, and I have photos of both properties. It was at 800 Wanda in Ferndale that the Nation of Islam picnics were held. They gathered in his backyard. There was a park close by. They also gathered at Belle Ile, an island park off the coast of Detroit. The picnics were held every Tuesday, right? Now, people of all walks of life organize picnics. So do many groups and denominations. But like, who had a tradition of organizing picnics in the 1920s and the 1930s? The Moors. The MSTA had a tradition of organizing picnics. Okay. The ancient Egyptian Arabic order of the nobles of the mystic shrine, the Black Shriners, also organized picnics. The White Shriners held picnics. According to our sources, it was a Muslim-only picnic. So maybe it was just Nation of Islam folks from the temple. Or were the early Black Muslims gathering with another group? It would be interesting to know. But yeah, there you have it.
Sounds good. So there's another reference. Saturday, June 20th, 1934, in the Cleveland Call, a Wally Muhammad and Sheikh Wally Dodd are mentioned, and Wally Muhammad is mentioned as a medicine man.
Right. So, you need to dig more into that, figure out who this person was, and why that person is referred to as the medicine man. Well, Wally Muhammad, he was a grocer, and I'm digging into it. Was his grocery store also a pharmacy? Is that why potentially he was called the medicine man, or is this a completely different person? As for that, that's a great find of yours, that Sheikh Wally Dodd. That's incredible. I don't think it was Farad. I think it was someone else, because I traced that name back as far as it could go until when that a person with a similar name entered the country. He was and so on. But I know that Anton Batey is working on that, and he wrote an essay on it. And I put him in touch with you. I don't know if he's reached out to you, but you can collaborate on that. He wants to do a deep dive. You've been just like swimming in newspapers.com for years now. It's just incredible, indefatigable. Yeah, that's, that's where the work has to be done. Yeah. So again, there are many questions that remain unanswered, but hopefully we will get to the bottom of this.
Yeah, and what's interesting about Sheikh Wali Dodd is he's mentioned in Jamila Hakim's 1979, but not as a sheikh. He's mentioned as and his wife, brother and sister, Sheikh Wali Dodd. And I was like, what? And they even gave the neighborhood where they used to live, and I was, huh.
Interesting.
Yeah, so I went back. So first I wrote it with like 2 references, and then I found more, and then I said, let me go check Jamila Hakim, because why was he not? He's not on the list of the 13 sheikhs, and I was like, I'm gonna go down the list and try to populate, try to find all 13, and he's mentioned later on as just a member, and who made him a sheikh? Was he before?
Right.
So
right, but it didn't take much to be appointed a sheikh in the 1920s and 30s. You basically took your shahada, and you were given an ijaza to lead the prayers and to teach the people. I mean, if you look at it sincerely, and it wasn't just among the Ahmedis, other Muslim groups, Sunnis and everything, they were just, appointing people like that. Okay, you're the sheikh, you're the imam. So anyone who had the motivation, who was driven, who was a community leader, you needed a leader. And, if you knew the basics, then you were put in charge. But you also mentioned that during that period in the early 1930s, mid 1930s, there was a schism in the Ahmadiyya community where some of the converts, well, it seems to me that they didn't want to be under the control of like foreigners and immigrants, and they didn't agree as to the direction the community in Islam should go in the Americas, right? That it should be, indigenous, it should be focused on the needs of America, this and that. So there were all kinds of things going on. And that's why some of these people, they just disappear, right? Because they split, right? Communities disintegrated, people moved. I think I've tracked that Sheikh Wali Dodd and who moved to California, unless I've got the wrong guy. But there was a community there, an Ahmadi community at that time in the 20s and 30s. So who knows? But it's possible we can have more clarity on these issues.
Yeah, and let me just read it to you. So in Jamila Hakim, 1979, which is inside of a book called Islam in North America, the source book, it is in a quote. It is said that Dr. Han was personally involved with the Muslims socially as well as spiritually, and he's remembered for his leisurely walks through Sweeney Court, which was a housing development with a heavy Muslim concentration in the 1930s. I looked up Sweeney Court in Pittsburgh. Where else could this be? This study is about Pittsburgh. So then he would give salams to everyone he met. He was teaching English. He was teaching, not English, he was teaching the 5 daily prayers in English and Arabic. He was teaching the Quran, Hadith, allegedly. And then on page 156, it says some of the Muslim families that were in Sweeney Court, and it's brother and sister Wali Dodd. So,
wow, interesting, very interesting.
Yeah. And so then Jamila Hakim didn't give any references either.
There you go.
So maybe it was oral tradition. So we can say, okay, an oral tradition from the people of Pittsburgh, because I think she went to Pittsburgh 40 years later, and this is what she got. So okay, let's see what. Oh, it said Sheikh Wali Dodd was referred to as God, and he was teaching Arabic.
Right. So there, because that article appears in other newspapers too. In one of them, there appears to be a typo. It mentions the God Sheikh, but it seems that it was either the good sheikh or the godly sheikh. There are other references to it. That's not in different newspapers. I think that's a typo, because that wouldn't fly among the Ahmedis, that the god, the sheikh was God, right?
Not at all. Not at all.
But the name is very interesting.
Yeah. So the name is suspicious. You know why? Like
It
Dodd?
is.
Where did you get? So whoever this person is, they know something. At a minimum, they know something, and they didn't get interviewed, and they took it to the grave, because why are you using that name, which is half a Tom White and half a Fred Dodd, and or whoever gave you that name, they know something.
Right. Yeah.
So okay.
I mean, Wally Muhammad was one of Farad's names. I mean, really, they were taking the names of their prophet, or whatever you want to call them, of their God, when they were embracing Islam. I mean, Wally Muhammad, Wally Farad Muhammad, that's W.D. Farad, and that's the name of Elijah Muhammad's brother, and
Wali Akram.
That name.
Wali Akram and
so many people. Yeah. So
Wally took the name too. So
yeah.
Wally, Wallace, even WD could be called Wally for short.
Yes.
Wally's a cool name. We can be called Wally. It's Americanized too. So like some Muslim names, like me, was Bashir. I people call me Bashir.
Yeah, Muhammad's become Mose and
whatever. But like a name like Sean is like, oh, that actually applies in many, and it works for all of us. Like if you have a daughter, name her Aisha, or if you're involved in hip hop, Aisha is a famous song. But some names that are good, that are easy to say on the ears.
Right. It's true. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Not something difficult like Farak.
Yeah.
So okay, then so I'm gonna skip the end of that paragraph there, and then skip number 14, because we already talked about that. 1931 is totally missing. We talked about this earlier. I can't find anything on 1930 or 1931. What happened?
Yeah,
there's just nothing. I mean, the only thing that I find, and we're gonna get to it, is November 1932 is the watershed moment.
Right.
Before that, you will not find, the draft, the census card. Okay, he was there. He was maybe in Chicago. I never filled out a census card properly 20 years ago. I never signed it. I used to not sign in properly anywhere I went. Why would I tell them, even at the Ahmadiyya events, I never signed in and got a badge. Like, in the 90s, you'd get a badge.
Right. I know.
You signed in. I never did. So, so okay, let's see what else here.
So yeah, I mean,
there's nothing in 1931.
We need to know what happened in 1930. It's just bare bones.
But yeah, totally bare bones, and the secrets are there. The secrets. I've even thought, hey, this building, if we can get, but it's gone now. But if we could get more information on the renters of the building, who rented the building, nowadays you might need a business license I mean, to rent a building. If you want to rent a building, if you want to rent an apartment, you have to show job. You have to show that you have you want to buy a car, you have to show income, right? You want to do anything, you want to make any purchases, and back then, okay, maybe not so much. But there's a lot there.
As far as I recall, there was a Jewish community center there, and so they were renting. I don't know if the owner was Jewish or if the Jews were renting. I don't know. But
again, if he was renting, that means he's not making a lot of money. And I'm going to get to the business aspect, the practicality of all of this, right? And the practicality is,
I don't think he wanted a 30-year mortgage on the place. I think he was thinking a bit more short term.
That's my point. No, that's my whole point. It's almost like he's trying to get caught, and then he hands it off to someone else and says, "I'm done. I got caught. Who cares? It was fun. It did what I wanted it to do.
Yeah.
And I got to womanize. I got to dance with young women with water on my head. I don't know. Maybe that's what he wants to do with his life. I'm a little bit more private.
Now, if you want an idea Well, I mean, really, I encourage people to go and look at the photographs of Laura Swanson. This is the Roaring 20s. And just Google Taylor Swift flapper dress. So one of her skimpy little mini skirts is actually a replica of a 1920s like flapper dress. So just imagine that this was, Farad's girlfriend in Oregon. And also Roaring 20s with Hazel Barton, her bleached blonde hair. These women were very promiscuous. They used to, they were out, they would drink to the point of alcoholism. They were involved in drugs, and they had lots of sexual partners. So it was a pretty wild time.
And it's Hollywood, baby.
Right? It's Hollywood. Like in the 1930s, dress codes became more conservative. And so they were like really, really short skirts in the 1920s, but now they go down, they go below the knee. And so in the 30s, Master Farad introduces like these codes of modesty for Black Muslim women. I don't know if it was the Pakistani in him, the Muslim in him. He's trying to bring back some of the hijab. But however, American society had changed. So the standards of modesty, the fashions and the trends had changed from the 20s to 30s. So really, it's just reflecting the change in society, right? That, we don't wear skirts that short anymore. We wear them longer. Had he repented and atoned, right? Was he reconnecting with his Islamic roots? If he was,
did he have a daughter?
It doesn't show in his teachings. Yeah. Right?
Or most people will have a daughter and now they're conservative. Their views change.
Right. Yes, that's true. Yeah.
Because of the whole hypocrisy angle.
Yes.
You're not leaving the house looking like that at all.
Exactly.
You're not wearing that. No. So now everyone's got to do it.
And we're honest.
Whereas look, most men, I'm gonna tell you, these are the stages of development men go through.
Right.
So I don't really know how to explain it other than that. I don't have any daughters, so my views could be a little different, but if I did, I'm totally different. The people who can come to my house, the list is different. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
Not even allowing anyone to come around, even if my sons have friends, they got to get screened before they come here. You're not allowing that.
That's just being a good parent. Yeah.
Yeah, being a good. Who's this guy? No. You ain't even looking over here. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
Sometimes you get beat up for staring too much. And that's
Right.
That's always been a thing. Not in Desi culture. In Desi culture, they'll stare like you wouldn't believe it. Like, dude, she's wearing a burqa. You can't see anything. Stop staring. It just looks weird.
Right. Right. See, that doesn't even protect them from the gaze.
Yeah, it doesn't protect them from the gaze, and I used to tell them, it's funny because I went to Pakistan when I was 24, 25. I tell them, look, women don't like it when you stare at them like that. Okay? It creeps them out. So you're not even helping your own cause. The little bit of chance you thought you had, you blew it. And now you think you're a rapist because the way you didn't break eye contact for like 5 minutes, bro.
Exactly. Oh my.
Okay.
Yeah.
So all right. 31 is missing. 1930 is missing. Elijah Muhammad even converted a little late. He wasn't there in 1930. Now the funding of it all. So when Burnsteen, we're gonna get to Burnsteen. She's writing letters. His laborers. These are his employees. Someone's got to pay them. They're and technically you could sleep at the temple, so you don't even, there's a shower. I'm sure how hard is it to get some water and some soap,
right.
You can thug it out, so you can live there. How many masjids, there are a bunch of men living there sleeping in the parking lot, like some immigrant situations, they're just sleeping at the masjid. So
yeah, in the masjid, the Tablighi Jamaat in the basement.
Dude. Yeah. So I'm saying all of these teachers, they live there, they eat together, they go to picnics together, they do everything together because it's cheaper. Same thing with the extended family. I used to tell people in Pakistan, you guys have no idea how hard it is in America, because it's not like we live with our extended family and all we got to make is like a few nickels a month. and there's no rent and there's always food and there's always fiesta. That's
Right.
not the situation.
You're right.
We live in an extreme case of individualism in America. You got to get it yourself, boy, or
Yeah.
or you got to steal it. There's only a few ways to get it, and most of them will go down the I'll sell drugs route, and then womanize. That's the route, because life is too hard. Thank God I didn't go down. Allah's kept me. I'm so happy I worked all these years, because it's the evidence and the proof that I'm trying to earn Jannah instead of like cutting a deal for it. So okay, where were we? So okay, the funding. He's given him. Okay, so brother, I don't do Christmas, obviously. I don't really give people gifts. I don't really. If you start showing up and giving someone a gift, it's what's the catch? Eddie Murphy said in Trading Places, when the guys picked him up, they're giving him all this, and he was like, y'all a bunch of gays trying to get me back to the, why are you giving me all this free stuff? So instead of pay, he was giving them gifts. What gifts was he giving them?
Well, if they answered certain questions or solved certain mathematical problems, there might be financial rewards. I mean, the ultimate reward was a round trip to Mecca, but of course he had to kill 3 people to get it. So, right? But yes, I mean, if he was actually giving out the amount of money that he said for all of these people who completed the lessons, they were expected to memorize them and they had to be able to answer them, then all of the money would have gone back into the community. Like, I'm not a mathematician, you're the accountant, and we know how many people they had. Like, there are different numbers, right? How many people? Some people say 25,000, 30,000. Some people say 7,000 converts. But okay, even at 7,000 converts, all of the people, they completed all these lessons and got this money. I don't think there's any money left. Yeah, if that's what they were doing. And it was incentivizing people to solve these problems.
Right.
To study these lessons.
What I saw was a business model, and I saw employees. Burnsteen, first female employee, not necessarily also a sincere follower, but that just goes with being an employee. First, she got a job. First, she was hired. When she first goes to the temple, she got hired, and she says her parents were there, but her dad goes missing soon thereafter. We don't know where he went. Right?
Yeah, well, that wouldn't be too hard to figure out with census records and death records and so on. John Muhammad was asked that question. Where did all the money go? Because people are giving all this money to the temple. And he says he never saw a dime. He never saw a penny. And that everything went to Elijah Muhammad. And he thought that was perfectly fair because he was the messenger of Allah. And they wanted to make sure that he lived comfortably and everything. Everything went to Elijah Muhammad, according to his brother John. And so these people, they had jobs, right? John Muhammad and a lot of these people, they worked in the auto industry. They were working at Ford. They were working, I don't know if there was a Chrysler back then, maybe, but whatever car, that whole industry in Detroit really helped provide for a lot of people. A lot of Arabs and Lebanese and immigrants, they were all working there, and a lot of African Americans. So they all had jobs, and they were doing this basically as a charitable endeavor, teaching at the temple. Like you teach madrasa every Sunday, or you teach Sunday school. Apparently they weren't getting paid.
Right. Because there are some volunteers.
Yeah.
There are some employees in every organization. There's an overlap, even in the Ahmadiyya movement. So my dad was like a free teacher, whereas the Murabbis or the Maulvis were getting paid. They're on payroll.
Yes.
So you mix them in, one person can do the other person's job. But the financials of it, he had to pay first month, last month rent before he got that. Or I don't know if they did that back then, but you would think you got to have some skin in the game. You're not just going to leave us early without paying rent. Now you're a squatter, which is what happened. They had to abandon the temple eventually in 1934, and it was gone.
Yeah, they were receiving support from the Japanese consulate. That's been well established. Now, how much money that was, I don't know. It would be interesting to know. That is corroborated. We have that in U.S. intelligence reports and so on. It's also confirmed in Japanese intelligence reports from Japan that Japan was, how was it phrased again? That, yeah, they told their agents they had 1,000 operating in the United States, in the 1920s and 1930s, that the goal of Japan was to control the Islams in America, right? So, yes, right. So to divide the nation, to stir up racial dissent, to incite Black people to revolt and to protest, to destabilize the country from within. And the Japanese were supporting Black supremacists, white supremacists, Nazis, socialists, communists, everyone on the political spectrum. It's the same. That's Putin's game. That's his angle. That's what he's been doing for decades now. He will support Black Lives Matter, and he will support white supremacists and fascists and so on. Why? Right? To create chaos, to destabilize the nation. The Japanese were doing that in the 20s and the 30s as well. So
U.S. government does the same. U.S. government.
Oh, absolutely.
Just look at Vietnam. Just look at Vietnam.
If there isn't a communist party in a country, they'll create one. Right? If there isn't a white supremacist group or a neo-Nazi group in a certain part of the country, they will create it. But you need to understand why they're doing it, to see it from their point of view. They want to draw the crazies out of their basements. They don't like lone wolves. Right. They like to keep an eye on things. That's why the Nation of Islam is very useful. It draws in Black radicals. They're not violent anymore. They're not killing people or committing human sacrifices, but they prefer to just keep an eye, just like they have agents in every masjid during every Jummah, and the FBI comes and visits every month and talks to the imam. I know imams all over Canada, right? Yeah. There, CSIS visits them. Here the FBI comes. They come every month and they say, Farouk, how you doing? Right? They give them some chai masala, anything going on. No, everything's calm. Or there's some crazy white convert talking jihad and shit, and we don't want trouble for our community. We're business people. Okay. So this guy over here, that white Black Muslim, right? Whatever. So they do. And they will report that because most Muslims want to live, they want to take care of their families and they want to provide, and they don't want to be associated with radicals and extremists and terrorists of that nature. So
which is strange because Farad tried to make a drug deal. Dude, if you're rich, you're a restaurant owner. Why are you making the drug deal?
Okay, now that it's possible he was set up because Farad had an attitude. Okay. So there's no doubt that, it was a speakeasy and they were selling booze and stuff. It's possible they were also dealing heroin, but that's not why he was set up. It's because he wouldn't pay. And that police officer was later arrested and charged for running a protection racket. He would go around to all of the businesses and say, pay your cut, pay your cut, pay your cut. And Farad told them, fuck you, I'm not paying the cut. And then he said, oh, yeah? Oh, what's this we find here? Oh, a bag of heroin. Right? So I think that's what happened.
There you go. Yeah, that makes sense.
I'm not saying he wasn't bootlegging because that's confirmed. I'm not saying he wasn't trafficking, but he wasn't paying the police for protection money. Okay,
it's so that's an essential part of it. You got to pay them guys.
Tax, man. You got to pay your taxes.
You gotta pay the Look, it's also called street taxes. Yes. If you're in someone's neighborhood and you're operating in someone's neighborhood, you got to pay taxes. Right. In fact, if you watch Goodfellas, everything they stole, they had to give Paulie a check.
Exactly.
Paulie don't get his cut.
Paying tribute, just like in the old country. Right.
Okay, that's just how it went. Look,
but also again, You needed to protect yourself from other cartels and enterprises and so on. So presumably this police officer was offering some protection from other groups. I mean, Farad was dealing with Chinese opium traffickers and stuff. These people don't mess around. So it's good to have the police on your side. But for whatever reason, you know, he didn't want to pay.
Yeah, and that's motivation for saying, okay, you screwed me over. I'm gonna go. I know some black Muslims, and I'm gonna go start some stuff and make it hard for you. So
Yeah.
you gotta play. So hey, that for me that totally checks out. And then maybe he got caught on purpose. Who knows? Who knows about the second part? So okay, then let's talk about the car. How many cars were there? When were Bernstein's car rides? Because Bernstein shows up in October 1932. She said Farad had a heavy foot. Was that
Yes.
October 1932? And is he
He
giving a
liked the
ride
speed.
home? So wait.
So a dapper dresser who liked nice cars, who liked speeding, and he had a history of liking beautiful blonde women.
So now
This is James Bond, man.
This
James
so
Bond ain't
he's
got nothing
17.
on Master Farad.
He's driving a 17-year-old girl home, and his wife's with him. Or did he say Clara Muhammad would be with them? Maybe.
Well, no. He used to, and this is like just mind-boggling. He would arrange to meet with Bernstein, a teenage girl, in abandoned freezer cars. You know, in the late hours of the evening and the early morning. So this is a 17-year-old girl. You have to meet me in like some abandoned freezer car in this, you know, this industrial area or this railway. And she would go to a designated area and he would be inside the freezer car, like in the darkness, and he would give her his new lessons, right? That she had to type out. So this was like really, really, for a teenage girl, this must have been very exciting. It was also very, very dangerous. And so there was, again, maybe part of her attraction was that whole mystery, that appeal, right? So anyhow, so according to Wakeel Allah, W.D. Farad drove a 1925 Ford Model Roadster. However, he provides no source to support this claim. All right. So maybe it's true, maybe it's not. As Hazel Barton reported to the FBI, W.D. Farad had visited her driving a 1929 Ford Model A coupe. The cost of such a vehicle ranged from $385 to $1,400, depending on the model. The high-end town car fetched the highest price. Adjusted for inflation, $385 in 1929 is equal to $7,106 in 2025. Adjusted for inflation, $1,400 in 1929 is equal to $25,839 in 2025. Although many early members of the Nation of Islam were destitute and relied upon charity to survive, those who were employed most often at the Ford auto plant earned approximately $1,500 per year. The cheapest 1929 Ford Model A would have been the equivalent of 3 months' salary, right? The top-end model would have represented an entire year's salary. Welfare, which was only introduced in 1925, paid around $30 per month or $360 per year. So to pay for a car, a person on welfare would have to save an entire year's worth of social assistance. If a white man purchased a new vehicle for W.D. Farad, who was the generous man who did so? And like I've mentioned before, I think it was Wally Muhammad, William Thomas White, a middle-class engineer. But why would a man buy another man a brand new car? It's just beyond bizarre. After all, they both seem to have disappeared in 1934, but I've shown that that's maybe he left, but he did come back, and I did find his grave, and I have a photograph of it. So that's intriguing. If his followers in the Nation of Islam did not buy him a vehicle, is it possible that W.D. Farad did so himself? After all, he was charging $10 to give original names to the faithful. He would have had plenty of cash. So estimates vary as to the number of NOI members in 1933. Numbers range from 8,000, 10,000, and even 30,000. So hence he would have cashed in 80,000, 100,000, or even $300,000, less the cost of the cards obtained from the printing company. So even if he charged $1 per card, he would have been rolling in money. Still, according to Wesley Muhammad, W.D. Farad gave the card to Elijah Muhammad when he dropped him off at the airport on February 26, 1934. But once again, there is no source. There's no reference. Who said this?
Yeah, and all we need is a license plate. You get us that license plate, and we'll get some answers.
Yes, I really wanted to get a driver's license, and I did try. I tried in California and Oregon. I tried in Michigan, Illinois, and I contacted the state archives, and they said driver's licenses have no historical value, so we've never kept them.
Yeah, unless it's digital. Yeah.
But some people have the driver's license of their dad or their granddad or things like that are passed in the family. So, I would love to see or a passport. I was trying to find a passport for Master Farad. How do you you need a driver's license to travel out of the country. You need a photo ID, a government ID. Maybe you need a passport too, depending on where you're going. So if only, and I tried through the State Department and so on to try to get more information, but we haven't succeeded yet. But I want more pictures of this man.
Yeah, and it sounds about right. He needed a car to move around, and Burnsteen said she was in it, and then she says she was trying to help him get another one. So okay, and then I talked about the parents of Burnsteen. Her father was a laborer. Was Burnsteen an employee? We talked about that. And then she didn't marry Farad until Farad's gone. 1935 is long gone, and then now she marries John Muhammad. Which did John Muhammad start working at the dealers at the Ford plant before 35, or was it after?
I'm not sure, but that was the go-to place to get a job. He dropped out of high school because they kept flunking him, holding him back. Yeah. He didn't marry because Master Farad told him not to marry. He told him this is not a time. Because
that's another way to say code for, dude, that's my girl, man. Back up.
Yeah. Who knows?
I mean, look. When people don't speak direct communication, then you got to look for. Oh, what did he say? He said this isn't the time. Oh, okay. Because I have kids too, and I know how to. Sometimes I just flat refuse a lot of things they said, and they'd be like disheartened. I'm like, oh, so they want me to lie to them. I'm like, right. Okay. Okay. So for a few years, I would just say I wouldn't say no, and I'd say maybe or something, and it would keep them away from me. They stay on my back. And I was like, just because I didn't. So the goal is to never tell the truth and to keep you guys off my back. Is that how this works, man? When really. Look, in the Quran, Allah didn't tell us everything. He didn't tell us a lot of stuff. He's left it a certain way. He said the samawati and the earth used to be one piece, and he broke them. Or something to that effect. Well, what does that mean? He said something like the earth is spread out, or it's like an egg. What does that mean? He just left it and said, because he's not going to tell us everything. Because if he did, that could be a problem.
Right.
So maybe it's the same. And a lot of times I saw Farad being asked questions, and he said, "No, I didn't tell you because you couldn't bear it. I gotta wait to tell you." The whole secreting, you don't tell everything on day one. You gotta slowly get it to him. So
right, he used to say, "Don't give meat to a baby, give him milk."
Give him milk. Right? Yeah. So okay, Burnsteen Sharif. There was another guy. She lived on Erskine Street in Detroit. Was her brother David Sharif? He lived at the same place. It's either her brother or her husband.
Yeah, I don't know.
But so that's the only address that matched her address, because they gave addresses on all of that.
Right.
So there's a guy who's got similar last name, and he's at the same address. So okay.
Yeah, it's
Uh,
family for sure. Yeah.
then let's talk about Farad describing the breasts of women, and be as brief as you want on this one.
Yeah. Now,
What is that about? That's very descriptive.
right, and it was so inappropriate and so offensive, and I mentioned that in the book that I didn't quote most of it. I just gave some segments, but it goes on and on and on. It's not a flattering description of Black people or African people. Um, and when we didn't have big lips. We had, you didn't have big lips. You had thin lips. You didn't have big breasts flabbing down, right? You had perky little ones. Your hair wasn't nappy. It was straight. Like, what standards of beauty are you talking about? I mean, these are white standards of beauty. So basically, he was telling them, well, you used to be good looking like white women. Right. So it's hard to read. It makes you cringe. It's cringe-worthy. But yeah, it's there. The references are there. I don't quote all of it, just a few segments. And you can like follow the reference to my source, and it's all there. But again, it's not pretty.
Yeah, again, it sounds like rap music. It all goes back to Jay-Z. It all goes back to Jay-Z. You know,
Yeah.
and he also called himself God MC. So okay,
Right.
let's see. Let's see, and we're coming down to the end here. Oh, Burnsteen didn't mention she was in jail.
Yeah.
Dude, if you get arrested, you're gonna remember 9 days. You did 9 days in the county jail with all women, and you were 18. That's something you have vivid memories about, and that was your only arrest ever.
Yeah, I'm not sure if she mentions that somewhere. I don't remember it. But yeah, but again, we don't have everything. I was just looking at a picture of everything that was found in her home. We only have a few of those documents that have been published. So there's a lot more there.
Yeah,
If only we could have access to it. I
yeah,
mean, I'm
yeah,
told
yeah.
that it's there. A museum is going to be created, and they're going to be on permanent exhibit. Well, I hope so, but I've been hearing this for a mighty long time.
Right. So okay, moving on. Tell me about, and I'll put it on the screen. This is like number 19, so we're almost done. Here we go. Tell me about Cuernavaca,
Oh,
Mexico.
Cuernavaca.
Cuernavaca.
Yeah. Well, W.D. Farad's final letter from 1934 came from Mexico. But as late as 1964, Elijah Muhammad was corresponding with my professor in Mexico. And he permanently moved to Mexico in 1974, where he bought a home at the golf club in Cuernavaca. He moved there with Taineta and their children. There's an entire chapter devoted to this topic in the book, and we don't have enough time to go into those details, but it's called The Professor Provides a Clue. Has Farad finally been found? It's chapter 23. We could devote an entire podcast to Elijah Muhammad in Mexico. If anyone wants to examine the evidence, read W.D. Farad, The Man, Myth, and Mystery Behind the Nation of Islam. So, yeah.
Sounds good. And hopefully, inshallah, I'll be going there and just to investigate Islam, see if there's anything, see if we can find Elijah Muhammad's family. Maybe they don't want to be found. That's the reason for being in Mexico, is you kind of don't want to be found.
Yeah.
But they're on the plateau in the middle, close to Mexico City, so you can go see the pyramids. Beautiful place. I actually want to retire there. I was checking it out, and I said, "Wow, this is amazing."
Yes.
and there's some diversity because there's some Lebanese folks there too. So I found that to be very interesting. Then the last sort of thing here is in 1934, Babe Ruth went to Japan. And, the whole baseball thing, we go back to baseball. Japanese play, Shohei just pitched the game and hit 3 home runs. Never been done before. So it seems like the Japanese were always on our side until we cut the oil. We stopped selling them oil. And they were like, what's that about? Because you guys were selling it to us. So I'm just curious about all that. And then I had some other notes in here about Wilayat Taqwiniyat, but like super Sufi concepts. But I think we covered that. So we'll just go to the last question. What's next?
Yeah. Is the case solved? What is next? No, the case is not solved. Far from it. We're only scratching the surface. There are 1,001 questions that remain unanswered.
And with that, brother, I'm gonna end the podcast. Thank you so much for coming out. I've loved every part of this. I'm a little slow. It took me some time, but I finally caught up, and now I'm totally caught up. So I should be able to go a little bit deeper. And with that, brothers and sisters, we end this podcast. Assalamu alaikum and peace out.